Okay, we should be live. Let's see. As my daughter says, let's see, let's see. Every time I say, let's see, she goes, let's see. It's adorable. Okay, so let's see here. How's the sound? Let me know how the sound is in the live chat. Please hit the like button. Hopefully we don't have any audio issues today. Let me bring this down a bit. I know we had some right at the very end of last week's live stream, but luckily it was right at the very end and nothing was really missed. But I do apologize. I'm going to try and really pay more attention to the live chat to see if there's anything going on with the sound. But I did update OBS, which is the software that I use to stream. So hopefully that took care of it. I tried researching things about it, and I only found some people talking about it in Spanish. And I guess I could have translated it, but they didn't really seem to have figured it out. But hopefully it doesn't happen again. Like I said, please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm, helps boost this content. I would really, really appreciate it. Last week's stream, despite our audio issues, was actually a great time. I really appreciate everybody who joined in for that and stuck around for the AMA that we did last week. I think it was a good one. I definitely can tell when I watched it back that I was talking about some topics that I was hesitant to discuss, and I was using a lot of filler words. I'm trying not to do that so much this time. I was trying not to offend people last week by saying that most people should not own dogs, that we should rethink our relationship with dogs. But you can watch last week's stream to figure out why I said that. And I love dogs. I have 2 dogs. But this week we're going to talk about space-time, and we're going to look at some models of sentient singularity theory. Some of you might know some of these, some of you might not. We're going to talk about the why space-time appears the way that it does, the how space-time gets constructed, and the who constructs it. That's what we're going to do. There's 6 fundamental questions you could say is who, what, where, when, why, and how. And where and when cannot be answered about space-time because that is the context of where and when. And I guess the how, I think it can be answered outside of a space-time material construct. But we're going to get into that. And, I shouldn't get too much on a tangent right away. Also, we are streaming tonight because of Thanksgiving, which is coming up. I love Thanksgiving. I almost did a stream tonight about gratitude. I've done one in the past. You can look it up, which is why I decided not to do it this week. But gratitude really is the key to having a relationship with God, with the universe, and with the universe. So it cannot be overstated how critical gratitude is. It's always interesting how a lot of these words that are really fundamental start with G. Not Goldstein, but gravity, God, gratitude, grace. You let me know any other ones you can think of in the chat, but there's something about that letter G that is very interesting. Maybe we'll talk about it on another stream, but I haven't thought enough about it right now to do a whole stream on it. So let's get into this. So space-time. Space-time is what is space-time? Let's look up the classical definition, and then we'll talk about what it really is, if it, and if that's even a good term for it. But space-time. So we've always had a concept of space and a concept of time far longer than we've had a concept of space-time. Space-time in physics, or also called the space-time continuum, is a mathematical model that fuses the 3 dimensions of space and the 1 dimension of time into a singular 4-dimensional continuum. This is according to Wikipedia. Space-time diagrams are useful in visualizing and understanding relativistic effects, such as how different observers perceive where and when events occur, and also how mass can have an impact on how time is perceived and things like that. But so in non-relativistic classical mechanics, treats time as a universal quantity of measurement that is uniform throughout, is separate from space, and is agreed upon by all observers. Classical mechanics assumes that time has a constant rate of passage, independent of the observer's state of motion or anything external. This is different from special relativity. Time cannot be separated from the 3 dimensions of space, which means it also can't be disconnected from matter, because matter and mass, it is all one thing. We're looking at one thing. Matter, space, time, these are all different perspectives of one thing. And general relativity provides an explanation for how gravitational fields can slow the passage of time from an object as seen from an observer outside of the field. So what happened with Einstein is space and time were linked. And this, obviously I would imagine many of you have learned about this in school. And it's very important to recognize that when we use the terms like time and even terms like space, we aren't always using them in the same exact context. So what time, when they say in classical mechanics, time is a universal quantity of measurement. It's basically like this arrow of time, this many 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year, 30 days in a month, 12 months in a year. Not exactly, but about. And what we think about that, we're not really, time is not just this metric, this measurement metric that we call a day or an hour or a second. What it really is it is we are looking at relational changes in causality, I guess, if changes in state, in relationship states. Maybe not the best term, but a day is one whole rotation of the Earth. A year is one whole, rotation of the sun by the Earth. A month is, what is it? It's a rotation. I don't even know exactly. I think it's a rotation of the moon around the Earth. No, it's not the moon around the Earth. What's a month? A month. That seems way too quick, guys. Way too quick. It's a unit of time approximately as long as the natural phase cycles of the moon. So, I guess it's how the moon looks based on the shadow of cast by the Earth on it from the sun. So this is like, I guess it's more how it looks than it is whether or not it's going around the Earth. So it would be based on how the Earth is moving and how the sun is around the sun, more so than it is just the moon around the Earth. It's kind of a combo, I guess. Never really, I mean, that's why it's called a moonth, according to, what's his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson. But, I guess I've never really thought about exactly what's going on in the relationship or I haven't in a long time, probably did in elementary school, between the moon and the sun and the Earth throughout a month. But this is not, this is not an objective. I don't even know if that's the right way to say it. Like, there is no objective metric of time. There isn't even really an arrow of time. And that's what is important to get at, is when we start thinking about what time is and what space-time is and where it comes from and how it's constructed, we have to start thinking about our perception of it. And what happens is when you do this is you recognize that there really is no such thing as an arrow of time. There is the perspective of time, which is time is causality beyond you. That's really what it is. It's causality beyond you. And there is an arrow of causality. Because of just the nature of causality itself is that, there is a cause. For every cause, there is an effect. And then that changes the state of existence in whatever, circumstance that you're considering. And then from that state, it changes the degrees of freedom and constraints that you have regarding what could be the next state after that. So but time is really the perception of the passage, the perception of change beyond you. That's what it is. It's the perception of things changing that kind of beyond your own internal perspective of yourself. This is also exactly what entropy is. It's just not from the first person perspective as much. But time is not this thing that is just an arrow that we exist on, that you can go back and forth. The universe is a dynamic system. It's a thing. It's not just a thing. It's a being. It's a someone. You are someone inside of someone. You are a mind inside a mind. Both you and me, as well as the mind that we are within, the being that we are within, is moving. Okay? Constantly moving. It's never static. If it was static, then you would be static, and you wouldn't even notice whether or not it was static. Because you can't perceive change. You can't perceive staticness. There's nothing to perceive. If the universe were to stop moving, completely come to a full stop, so would you, and so would your ability to perceive change and your ability to change. So it would just be like everything went on pause. EveryOne went on pause. And but this is what time is, and really is that it is most fundamentally, it is the perception of change or of causality around us. That's it. And some of those things, those changes and that happen around us are regular. They are repetitive, at least. I don't even know if regular is the right way to put it, but they are repetitive, like the perception of the Earth going around the sun, or the perception of the rising and setting of the sun every single day, which is apparently due to the spinning of the Earth. It's not that I don't believe that. It's just if space and time are relativistic, okay, then shape is relativistic. It's not this absolute thing, this objective thing that the Earth is a sphere. People argue, is the Earth a sphere or is it flat? And then physicists will argue that space-time is relativistic, which means matter and objects, spatial objects, are relativistic, and which means why you shouldn't even be arguing about this. You just from the outside of the Earth. I've never been outside the Earth, so taking astronauts' word for it, it appears as a sphere, the Earth, when you look back. But and certainly the models in our minds and our mathematical models seem to work with that idea. And then when you're on Earth or in Earth, it appears flat, unless you're trying to perceive parts of it beyond you to some degree, then you start to perceive curvature, and that's done through math and you know things like that. But just from the general perspective of how you navigate, it's done on a flat plane, and it's not even necessarily just on a flat plane. It's perceived on a flat plane, but it's navigated in a straight line from here to there. But whatever it is that you're trying to do. So it's always funny to me when people argue over the shape of the Earth. I'm like, this is not a good argument to have. Material structure is relativistic if space-time is relativistic. Nobody seems to talk about that, which is funny. But when all of this is constructed around sentience, around mind. It is constructed and contained within the context of you being a mind inside of a mind, surrounded by other minds, and composed of an assembly of smaller minds. That's the context of the perception of space-time. And that's important to recognize. So in Sentient Singularity Theory, haircut looking fancy. Thank you. We did family photos recently. And it actually turned out really nice. There are things that your wife is going to want to do, and you are not going to think that it's important. But then when you do it, you appreciate it. Not saying everything, but some things. Sometimes you can let her get a throw rug or throw pillows or take or book family photos. So, good evening. No one would know what time it is without clocks, including the sky clock. Yeah, exactly. And what is a clock? It's funny. I got this watch a few years ago. It's the most expensive piece of clothing that I can't even call it a piece of clothing, but I bought it because I liked the way that it looks and because I'm fascinated by the technology, not because I feel like it's a super useful thing for me to have because I always have my phone. But it is useful, actually. I have found it to be useful. But this is the first watch I've ever bought myself. And it took me a long time to decide whether or not I was going to get it. It was only I don't know, maybe like $300, which is a lot for me. I don't spend on clothing. My shirts, most of my shirts are 15 years old. My wife is always, give me crap for it. But I definitely need new clothes. But I did like it, and I'm fascinated by the technology of it. I just started learning about the fact that this has no battery. This watch has no battery. It is just a bunch of springs. And moving, I can feel this pendulum inside of it when I move it, is basically charging the spring inside of it. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of technology. I remember it's funny, my boss of mine, when I was first deciding whether or not to buy this, I was asking my boss that I had and he had Rolex, and I was asking him questions about buying a watch, and I was like, well, what kind of batteries does that take? And he was like, this doesn't take batteries. He was insulted by it. Which I understand. If you're a Rolex guy and somebody's like, what kind of batteries does that take? I mean, that just shows you how little I knew about watches. Now I know a little bit more about watches because I did a lot of research before I bought this. And I think that this is fascinating. But what it is it's just it's just a spring, a bunch of springs inside that oscillate, I guess, at a certain interval and move the hands at a certain interval because of that. But you have to keep wearing it. If I don't wear it for 2 days or something, then it completely shuts off, and then I have to reset it. But it is fascinating. It's gotten me to think a lot more about about time um, and just how it's tied to sentient motion, which is what it is. I mean, it's funny. It's much more like relevant, this watch, than apparently relevant. I don't want to say it's much more relevant, because if you get really into it, it's all relevant. But it's much more obviously apparently relevant to how the universe actually is working, to think about like a mechanical watch versus like a digital watch, which you don't really think about how that works at all. It's so far removed from most of us. And how does your phone keep time? It's probably updating via satellites, and it's also probably got an internal clock that's digital somehow. It's relying on electrons or something. I don't know. I have no idea. But this one, I know how it works. I can feel it working, and I can feel that I power it. It's not separate from me. It's like much more one with me. This machine doesn't work without me. It's very interesting to think about. It's an older technology, but it's also so elegant. Like, just like watchmaking. Watches are fascinating. I don't think I'm somebody that finds like what they like, finds the sunglasses that they like, gets a few pairs of the same exact sunglasses, hopefully never buys another pair in their life, finds the shorts they like, buys a couple pairs, never buys any others, finds the watch they like, never buys another watch. I'm a creature of extraordinary amount of habit, I guess. Find what I like, I do a lot of research on it, and I stick with it. But I do like look at other watches, and there's, if you look at like a Jacob Astronomia watch, that's an amazing watch. That's like $1 million, and it's got like planets that move around a central sun, and let's look at this here. You can see Jacob Astronomia. I would never wear anything like that. I don't think. I just can't. I'm just an understated person as far as I don't like to stick out. I don't like attention, but this is incredible. I understand why it's an amazing piece of art. That's nuts. There's a cool snake one that I saw that they made, but they're like, $1 million. Timepieces. People can get it to match their Bugatti. That's not as interesting though as like this, the cosmos. It's literally like the cosmos orbiting around each other. Each one of these, by the way, is like a diamond and a sapphire and a ruby and another diamond. These aren't glass. They're all natural stones. And there's no batteries to this. It's just based on you moving. And it's funny because, let's see here. Wow. Look at that. Dang. That's pretty amazing. It's not my style. I'm very practical, but that one is about as fancy as I get. But that is it is an incredible, piece of work. But what's fascinating about it is that there's no batteries. It's just powered by your movement. For the longest time, I saw all these like videos when I was doing research on watches of these watch boxes where you store your watches, if you collect watches, inside your closet, and they're constantly spinning. The box moves. And I thought it was just for show for the longest time. And then I realized it's to keep the watch from losing momentum, from dying, basically, because and to keep it going, to keep the time, so that you don't have to constantly reset the time on your watch every time you want to wear it after taking a break for a day or two. because I started storing my watch in in my drawer, and then after, if I let it go for 2 days, it would be dead. And then I was like, wow, that's why they put them in those moving storage boxes. It's a fascinating culture, watch collecting. It's I'll never be a watch collector, but it is cool. They are amazing pieces of work for sure, and they are kind of the first like smart device. I mean, they definitely are. They're a dynamic device that you know carry with you every day that helps you keep the time. But it's just interesting that everybody has to be on the same time, which is obviously based on the sun and the earth and the moon and everything. But we're inside. It's funny because like you see in that little watch, they're modeling the sun and the moon and the earth and everything, and it follows the actual like state of everything, or at least some of them do. Which it's just like a micro model of what's actually happening. So we are in this clock, and we've just miniaturized it and put it on our wrists. And some of them are simple, and it's just got a little line for each object that we're tracking, and some of them are super complex and $1 million. But it is still just a miniaturization of the clock that we're in, that is the solar system, which is a physical structure. It's a physically perceived structure. But there's something more fundamental than a physically perceived structure that is responsible for the physical structure that we're perceiving. And that's what I want to talk about, because that's what sentient singularity theory is about. It's not really about the perception of physical structures. It explains where they come from, why we see them the way that we do, and that's it. It's not about like measuring things in a relativistic context, which would be using a metric like seconds or degrees, in 0.00000000000 seconds after the Big Bang, the universe was this temperature. And that's not what sentient singularity theory is about. It's about what are the mathematical constraints and what is the fundamental context, or I would say the quantitative constraints and the fundamental context that of creation itself, of the creation of the universe, of really a second mind within the first mind. That's what it's about, sentient singularity theory, which that is the context of the perception of spacetime. But it's not. It doesn't focus on degrees and seconds and things like that. That's way more subjective or relativistic, I would say. And fundamental theory is not. It's about what's fundamental, not what is relativistic. And but what's interesting is that space-time, if it's one thing, if time is the perception of causality beyond us, of change beyond us, particularly in a physical state, or an object in an objective way, I guess I don't mean objective as in like absolute. I mean objective as in kind of just the perception of objects. Space is the same exact thing as that. And I would say time is like how you perceive yourself in the context of being surrounded by a bunch of things in space, or which is really like, what's the difference between a thing in space and space itself? There isn't really one. It's just the context of you perceiving yourself with surrounded by things changing around you. And space is kind of the opposite of that. It's like you perceiving things around you, but not in a state of change, in a static state. But the difference is in how is in what your mind is focused on. So, this water puddle, if we just put this outside and we sped up time and we watched this on a like a, what's it called? Like a time lapse, just decay away. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the show or the movie. What was it? Time Machine is an old movie from, I mean, how old? Old is relativistic, but old to me now at this point. I think it was made in the 2000s, early 2000s. Let's see. Movie Time Machine. Time Machine. Okay, 1960, but then there was one that was 2002. I knew it early. And fascinating movie, very depressing, actually. Guy invents a time machine. It's with directed by Simon Wells and starring Guy Pearce. He's an inventor at Columbia University in New York, who basically, after a mugger kills his fiancée Emma, he devotes his time to building a time machine to bring her back. Interesting. I haven't watched it in many, many years. It's definitely got some deep lessons to it that I've forgotten. But, there's scenes where he's just like flying through time and everything is just changing around him. And what that really means is that everything is spatially changing around him. Space is changing around him, or objects in space are changing around him as he moves through time. So, but when you see an object in a specific moment, like looking at this water bottle right now, not perceiving it in a time lapse as it rusts throughout, from the beginning of it's sitting here to the time that it rusts and disintegrates away, but just looking at it here in this moment, it doesn't appear to be changing. I'm focused on the object. I'm focused on this room around me, not how it changes as the house I'm in just rots away from, mold or something. It's but you're not really changing where you're at or even what you're looking at. What you're changing is how you're looking at it, which is really like your goal. What is your focus? Your mental focus. It's not even a physical focus, because you can look at something and perceive it changing as a dynamic, system of change, or you can look at the same exact spot and perceive a specifically defined object. It's the same exact thing as this. When I hold this up and I say, do you see the square? Yes. Do you see the squares? Multiple? Yes. Do you see the wave? Yes. So square, singular, squares within squares, multiple. And do you see the wave? And then also, do you see the helix, which is really like the information system, essentially. More fundamental information system, which is would be kind of assembly time, like in Lee Cronin's assembly theory. Assembly time is like the amount of how an object is formed based on how molecules assemble to form it, essentially, and how atoms assemble to form the molecules within it. It's about that type of level of change. It's not about I don't know, relativistic context of change, like you molded something or painted something. It's about how many atoms and molecules you've assembled into a certain object. And both of them are actually relativistic, but one of them is less relativistic. I guess one of them could be not relativistic. It just depends how whether or not you're counting the right units. Which any fundamental unit would be a sentient unit. So in sentient singularity theory, a hadron, a proton, and a neutron. Protons and neutrons are the first sentient beings within the universe. Universe is a sentient being, it's a mind. And then the first minds within it would be protons and neutrons. And then it just scales up from there. But we'll talk about that. This movie is, though, it's kind of creepy. That's Time Machine movie. You'll definitely appreciate looking back 30 years at the photos. Yeah, exactly. That's how you perceive the passage of time, is by agreeing to do your family photos, for to appease your wife's requests. And then you'll look back at 30 years and you'll be like, dang, I have more hair. I'm sure I will look back and think that. I actually thought I'd be bald by 30, and I'm very grateful to God. Speaking of gratitude, and to God that I'm not bald yet. Nothing wrong with being bald, but when I do go bald, I'll rock it. But it was distressing to have learned that I was going to lose my hair when I first learned it. But like I said, the passage of time is the perception of the passage of time is the perception of motion, which is really the perception of two different states. One that preceded two different states in succession of a specific object, I guess you could say. And so that's, I guess, I hope I'm not rambling too much, but I want to get into what is like fundamentally where it comes from, and because you can look up like what time and space relativistically are, but they don't. That's not exactly as relevant to sentient singularity theory. Not immediately. So, if you know sentient singularity theory, you can go to sentientsingularity.com. We go to writings. Sentient singularity theory is a proposal for a fundamental metaphysics framework. Sentient singularity theory describes the totality of fundamental existence as an initial and all-encompassing singularity of sentience that is creating additional sentient singularities within itself. Sentient singularity is a sentient being. You are sentient singularity. You are someone. That's what a sentient singularity is. Someone, sentient singularity. So that's what it's not something that's like, that alien to your experience. It is exactly your experience. It is you. And this is the context that sentient singularity theory is focused on. So this right here is the right here. Holonic periodicity in sentient singularity theory. So imagine you're God, you create a universe inside of you, which is a sentient being. It's a second sentient being. You're the first sentient being. You're eternal. You're God, sentient existence. You create a sentient being within yourself. That being is also a sentient being. It's also someone. It's the second someone, and it is the universe or the cosmos itself. And within that being, you have this periodicity of sentience. And it's a singularity stacked on top of an assembly always. So a hadron on top of an assembly of quarks, which quarks are not sentient in sentient singularity theory. They're just kind of the fingers of God, or the fingers of the universe, you could say. They are force points. That's really what they are. They're points of force that are being enacted to animate existence within a universe. And then hadrons assemble to form an atom. atoms assemble to form a molecule, molecules assemble to form a cells, cells assemble to form an organism, and organisms assemble to form a family or a marriage. But they're the same thing. In this case, basically that, and then organisms assemble, families assemble to form a caste or a tribe, and castes or tribes assemble to form human civilization, but eventually that gets headed by a technological, by a singularity of sentience itself, which is kind of the internet waking up. And we've talked about it many times, but we can talk about it again at some other time. But this is the final stacking, which is stacking is whenever you get, there's adaptation in sentient singularity theory. Obviously, there's adaptation in Darwinian evolution, and evolution in general, or the evolution exist. Adaptation is a concept that existed, and heritability is a concept that was well known way before Darwin. It's not something that is unique to Darwin. I actually think Darwin is very incomplete, but it's not wrong. There is adaptation, but they were selectively breeding crops way before Darwin, and that means you have an understanding of heritability, and for certain traits. But the point is that adaptation, is usually what's thought of when we think of evolution or Darwinian evolution. It's the change, the physical change of genetic change of an organism over generations. And but this is only half of evolution if in sentient singularity theory. Evolution has two parts to it in sentient singularity theory. There's adaptation, and then there's ascension, basically. And I know that sounds a little woo, so there's another way of putting it is replication and stacking. Okay, so replication is the context in which adaptation takes place, because it takes place in generationality, one generation to the next. Then there's this ascension part of it that people will say that sounds like nonsense, but no, it's not. And there's absolutely proof of it you are proof of it, because you are an assembly of cells, and of multiple cells. You are a sentient mind stacked on top of an assembly of other sentient minds that are called cells. How did that happen? How do you get a multicellular organism that is sentient, a single sentient being that is someone, stacked on top of just a clump of other someones? That is what I call ascension or stacking. And you stack an atom on top of hadrons, an assembly of hadrons. You stack an organism on top of an assembly of cells. So this, and the first time that process occurs, the first time that there is an organism from an assembly of cells, like a multicellular organism from an assembly of single cells, that's an ascension moment. We don't know in science, there is no narrative right now that is understood about how that happens. And I think that it happens beyond the metaphysical curtain. I don't think it's something that happens in space-time exactly. There are things that happen in space-time that are related to it, but the actual process of that happening, I think it happens beyond the metaphysical curtain. So I'm not sure we will ever prove how it happens, but we can. There are certain assumptions that sentient singularity theory seems to suggest about it, but ultimately it comes down to also choice by God, essentially. Like he can choose whether or not to partition an additional part of his sentience off and have it be embodied in within a certain assembly that exists. But if he chooses not to do that, then it doesn't happen. Which is why I think it has to be a choice is for that every time that there's a stacking event, because every time he partitions his sentience, it's a choice, because oneness is the default of existence by definition. It's all one. So there's only one existence. So this is, I realize I might be like blowing over these like big things, but we've talked about them many, many times, and I'm trying to get to space-time a bit. But this right here is the context of space-time. So you are here, and you're looking around, and all of these other beings around you, all these beings that make up you, all the beings that make up those beings, all the beings that make up those beings, and the beings that make up those beings, and the beings that you're within, kind of nested within, whether or not you realize it or not, are all maneuvering around you. Not all these quite yet. Definitely not these. This one yet. We're not at that point. But when you look at the stage, these are like the stages of sentience. There's lineages that maneuver in time, which is over change over generationality, and individuals that maneuver in space with via changes in their relationships. An atom maneuvers in time. Why? Because atoms are where are the context of elements. So like gold or silver. This last time was me shooting this silver coin. There's a video of it in last week's stream if you want to see it, me shooting this with a sniper rifle. But this is made of basically pure silver. It's like 99.999% silver, something like that. I didn't realize that pure silver doesn't tarnish. I didn't know that. Because sterling silver tarnishes, but that's because it has copper and stuff mixed into it. I didn't realize that it's not just gold that doesn't tarnish, it's also silver. It's interesting. I didn't know that. But they are different elements, and how the various elements are created is each one is created from the previous. So they used to call them different species of atoms, and so gold was a different species from silver. It's not a bad way of thinking about it, actually. But so basically, you're witnessing adaptation on the atomic level, and the changes in the conditions that produce adaptation among atoms is the changes is the state inside of a star. When a star explodes, the amount of pressure dictates what elements are created, and also prior to it exploding, the amount of pressure and what elements have already been created dictate what elements can now be created that have not yet been created. So this is the same exact thing as adaptation, which is adaptation is how do you get from a fish to a bird, but not how do you get from a bird from a bunch of cells, like just an assembly of the cells that make up a bird's body. That would be kind of an ascension event, which would be the first time that you jump from level to level. The first multicellular organism was an ascension event. The first cell was an ascension from a bunch of molecules was an ascension event. And then from there you get adaptation. So, but this is all of these beings are moving constantly. Atoms and molecules and cells and organisms, they are all constantly moving. It's interesting because sleep, what is sleep, why do we need it, is because of this context. You wouldn't need to sleep if you were just a being that was not composed of a bunch of other sentient beings. You only need to sleep because you are a being composed of a bunch of other sentient beings. You are in this periodicity. And once it hits the end here, then it restarts. It recreates this entire thing within itself again. So it replicates within itself, kind of like a Matryoshka doll. But the reason why you need sleep is because I'm I am the king of my cells. If I say I go grab that water bottle, all the cells in my arm now need to go grab this water bottle. If I am telling myself to speak to you, all the cells in my body that are relevant need to get in line and do what they need to do and follow orders to be able to speak, to allow me to speak. They're all on the clock when you're awake. When you go to sleep, the king or the boss lets everybody off the clock, basically. And you get to go your cells get to go do the things that they need to do for them. They get to go eat. They get to go rest themselves. They get to clean up their space, which is, get rid of waste products and things around them, and organize their space because they're not busy doing a task that you've dictated to them. That's why when you don't let your cells sleep, your body breaks down a little bit. Not even a little bit. It starts to break down. On a cellular level, it starts to break down because your cells are not able to take care of themselves. That's also why you heal when you sleep. It's because your cells are free to do all these other things that are locally relevant to their immediate space. Because they're not focused on tasks that are holistic to your goals as the super as the king of all of your cells, the metaphysical king. So that's why you need to sleep. And it's funny because that forms like a perception of time. People say things like, oh yeah, like while you're sleeping, short-term memory is converted to long-term memory. Maybe that's true. I don't know how true it actually is though, because when you understand what memories are and how they're not actually stored, their memories are just information, okay? And they're not stored in your brain. They're stored in the assembly structure of existence itself, of the universe itself. But your ability to remember things is dependent upon the context that you have, because context is information. There is no such thing as information outside of context. Context is information. So that's like when we've talked on here about why can't you remember things from before you were like 3, usually, is because you don't have the language before you're 3 yet, for the most part, to be able to remember, to label the memories. So it's not that the memories aren't there, it's that you can't access them because they're not labeled. It's like if there's a file on your computer, but you didn't label it. Or let's say you labeled it with a color, but no words or no letters. Good luck searching for it when you only have the ability to search using words and letters. Which is why a smell will trigger a memory from before you were young, which is usually just a feeling from when you were before you were 3. But you won't be able to remember like doors and windows and things like that usually because you don't know what they are even yet, so you can't like isolate them when you're looking around. But so you just can't search for it. You don't have that same exact thing happens with sleep, in that when you're thinking about what you did last week or even yesterday, if you haven't slept between that event and your current state, then there's no context for yesterday that you perceive as like from a first-hand perspective. You might understand that yes, the sun went up and down, or that it was AM and then PM and then AM and then PM again, but that doesn't matter to your first-person perspective. When you go to sleep and then wake up, it adds context to your memories, which allows you to I guess to concretize them in a specific order of events. Because you could say yesterday, today I did this and yesterday I did that. But if you don't sleep for 3 days, you'll be like, what did I do that yesterday? Or did I do that the day before? Like, you don't know because you're missing the context for yesterday, the firsthand context. It's fascinating. All of this stuff is so much more simple and elegant than most people think. We're so focused on chemicals in the brain and relativistic, concepts to make sense of everything from memory to sleep, and we don't realize that our sentience is the context. Sentience is the context. So, but I hope that makes some sense. I mean, it's amazing. Like, I remember when I first started this project, I went up to a friend of mine and I was like, this has allowed me to understand really odd things, like even sleep, like why we need to sleep. I totally get why we need to sleep. And he was like, why? And I told him and he was like, that makes so much sense. And if you look up right now on Google, why or purpose of sleep, the way that it's even attempted to be discussed is relativistic. The purpose of sleep is to allow the body and brain, relativistic structures that are not fundamental, to recharge, repair, and perform vital functions like clearing waste, storing memories, and releasing hormones. We know that, but why? That's the question. Why? Science doesn't ask why because it doesn't understand what why even means, because there's no metaphysical context to any of its observations. People think that a description today compose much of our scientific narratives, or many of our scientific narratives, is equivalent to an explanation, and it's not. Does your body recharge, repair, and perform vital functions like clear waste and store memories, and release hormones while you sleep? Yes. But why is it while you sleep? Because your body fundamentally isn't 4 arms or 4 arms, 2 arms and 2 legs, and a head and hair and eyes. That's relativistically true, but your body fundamentally is an assembly of cells. That's what it is. And that's the context that causality actually occurs in, because that's where sentient beings are the only animated structures. Everything else just appears animated, but it's always non-sentient structures that appear animated are being animated by sentient beings. Always. And inanimate structure that appears animated, I guess, would appear that way because there are sentient beings that are animated that are changing, like rust. Like, why does rust occur? It's like that's not an inanimate. There's something that's dynamic, that's not inanimate, that's changing and moving. And we're perceiving it, as a water bottle rusting because the water bottle is inanimate, but the molecules that make up the water bottle are not inanimate. They are beings, which being is an active thing, something that exists and is active. To be is to exist. Being, ing, is to move. Ing. Meaning. Ing. Denoting verbal action, an instance of this or its result. Denoting material used in, okay. Ing. Suffix. I think it's called a suffix. That's like going way back to elementary school. Ing. Yeah. The ing suffix has multiple meanings, primarily functioning to form nouns indicating an action or process, or verbs, which are an action or process, prescribing an ongoing action, swimming, acting, grounding, moving, creating. It can also create adjectives, and its older forms were used to create nouns meaning belonging to or made of. Interesting. Language, I used to be so bored with language, and now I realize it is like there's so much wisdom built into language. It's just we have bastardized so much of it and disconnected so much of it from its structural formative constraints that it destroys its meaning. Fascinating. I didn't know that it meant made of, but that makes perfect sense. Belonging to. That makes perfect sense. But yeah. So, okay, let's go to the chat, and then I'm going to get into more about this. Please hit the like button, by the way, if you find this interesting. It really helps. I really appreciate it. The only concept of time that I can believe it these days is from Bergson. Who's Bergson? Let's look it up. Bergson. Time. Henry Bergson viewed time as duration, a continuous, indivisible flow of subjective experience. Yes, like unlike the clock time of discrete measurable moments used for scientific purposes. He argued that our lived experience of time is a fluid continuum where past and future constantly intermingle, and a process he called duration, which can only be understood through intuition. Well, I would agree that duration can only be understood through intuition because it's kind of experienced. But I would say that that's not true that past and future intermingle. It's not what happens. Time is existence is an ever-present, exists in an ever-present state. There's no such thing as the future or the past. The future is a concept, and the past is also a concept. It's just but the present is all that there is, really. And so I wouldn't say it's an intermingling between the future and the past, unless you define future and past like that. Is the future is possibility, I guess you could say, and the past is just the set preceding state of the present, I guess. I don't know the best way to describe it, but interesting. But I don't really disagree with him, but I'm going to show a model in a minute of space-time. And so there's this video that I made a long time ago. And let's see. If you go to videos on my channel and you scroll all the way down, you look here at, these are really old. Space-Time in the Observerse, right here. This video. When you have a mustache and you take a drink, it's an event. Old school. All right. So I get into kind of like showing some mathematical visuals about like what is going on with this stuff. And I talk about like you're a guppy inside of a bucket and all kinds of interesting things. They're metaphors, but they're not. They're very useful. So, but just imagine you are a mind. You're a guppy inside of a bucket, which is really like another fish, basically. And but let's just imagine a bucket, and that bucket is filled with a fluid. That fluid, the bucket is spinning, by the way. The bucket is spinning. And it's spinning all the fluid within it, and it's spinning it into a vortex, basically. And here. And this, what's happening in this ether, you could call it, this kind of this fluid that we're within, is really just a bunch of sentient beings that are like all moving around each other, like a bunch of grains of sand, or water molecules or something. And it appears like a fluid. It's moving like in a fluid way, but it's actually it's just a bunch of discrete structures which are sentient singularities. But when they're moving all together, it appears like you're inside this bucket. You're this guppy inside this bucket that's spinning, and there's basically like this whirlpool that's going around, and you're spinning inside this bucket. Now, what's going on is that the bucket is spinning faster than you can swim, which really means that it's changing more than you are able to. It's changing more things than just you, which is really like fundamental change happening at a rate that's beyond your ability to navigate mentally or otherwise. And so imagine this, though, as like you're a guppy in a bucket that's spinning, and the water inside the bucket is spinning, and it's spinning faster than you can swim. Okay. What this means is that you will eventually only go one direction. Okay. Because you can't swim faster than the bucket is spinning. It's just impossible. It's because you're swimming inside of it. It's like I don't know if exactly the right way to contextualize this, but if you're inside of like a truck and you're running around inside the truck, like you can't run faster than the truck can move and stay inside the truck, basically. And I get it. Like if there's, basically it seems like the truck isn't even moving if you're in it. So, and if you back up and you look at it from the outside, you're moving as fast as you're moving plus the speed of the truck. But that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that we need to think about this in terms of context. You cannot move faster from one, if you're inside like a semi truck and it's going down the road, you cannot move faster from one point of the road to the other than like the semi truck moves. I don't know if this is a terrible metaphor. This is terrible. Maybe I just scrap that entire thing. But yeah, I'm going to scrap that entire thing. But basically, the guppy in the bucket thing works. You can't swim as fast as the water inside the bucket is moving. So it's all moving around you faster. What this means is that you will only ever be moved one direction. And that's true of how we perceive spacetime right now. You can only go to the future. You can't go to the past. And that's because... But if you imagine you're a guppy in a bucket and the water is spinning that you're within, and you start swimming with the current, what happens is you can go faster than you normally would go, and it's like you could go to the future. And that's exactly what happens when we are in space-time. When we perceive ourselves in space-time, we start going really, really fast. Like if you got in a spaceship and you started going, super fast, approaching the speed of light or something, you would basically go to the future, but you could not go to the past no matter what you do. And the good way of thinking about why that's kind of structurally the case is the guppy in the bucket thing. You can catch a wave and go faster than normal because you can kind of ride the speed of causality, which is exactly what you do when you really start going fast enough to where it's like relevant to the speed of causality, which is what the speed of light is. It's not the speed of light. It's the speed of causality itself. It's the fastest that anything can happen. That's why nothing can go faster than light. It's not that light is so fast. It's that nothing can go faster than the universe changing. That's what the speed of light is. It's the speed of causality. Had that revelation too very early. It's like my first physics revelation ever. So I was like, I had this revelation about space-time and how the speed of light isn't really the speed of light. It's the speed of time is what I wrote down in this notebook that I had. I was writing these like kind of revelations early on. Once I left it at a grocery store at the checkout, and there was like, I mean, it had like so much written in there about like time is not the speed of light is not the speed of light. It's the speed of time, and which is, God moving. And like somebody, I had my phone number in it, and somebody who worked there called me and returned it to me. They were like, you left your notebook here. They must have thought they found like just like some schizophrenic person's notebook. I was just laughing hysterically. I was like, I wonder what they thought. They probably thought I was just like a schizophrenic drug addict or something like that. And because it just looked like, because my handwriting's bad though, not because I was crazy. And but now I just do it in Excel and look a little bit less crazy. But what I meant by when I wrote that originally was it's the speed of time, is that it's the fastest anything can happen. And I didn't know this, and I had never taken a physics class, and I was like, I need to talk to somebody at like the university and find out if I'm right. And then I was like, wait, I could just Google this and watch a lecture, at a university on space-time. So I did that. And the very first beginning of the lecture, the physics professor starts the lecture and he goes, first thing that you need to know about the speed of light is it's not the speed of light, it's the speed of causality. And I was like, that's what I mean. And then I knew I was onto something. And then now here we are. But the thing is about this metaphor about the guppy in the bucket is that it's still kind of in a relativistic context. It's the water or the ether is just the perception of the fluidity of a multiplicity of singularities. Like when you have a cup full of bearings or something and you pour it, and it pours like water or sand or something like that. It pours like a fluid, and but it's every single little sentient singularity in it, in the cosmos, is moving. And that creates the perception of kind of the flow of time. Is due to the directionality of spin, kind of the universe. But it's not just really that. It's due to the intrinsic logical constraint that of cause and effect, is that there's a directionality to cause and effect, which is what is the directionality of the spin of the universe. It's that, things only happen one direction. You can't build a house from the roof down. You build a house from the foundation up. You have to. You can't do it any other way. And that is what is responsible for this like metaphor of the spin of the universe is spinning in one direction. And so what this really means is that there's change that happens when I say that time is moving or is flowing faster than you can swim, or spinning faster than you can swim. This ether is spinning faster than you can swim, and the time is flowing faster than you can than you can move. Really, fundamentally, what's happening is that things are changing faster than you can then you can stop them. You can't stop them because even to stop them is to change yourself, and it just doesn't work. But there's so many things changing, and you can't stop them because you're not. All these beings are animated. Every cell in your body, it moves individually and is its own someone, doing its own thing, pursuing its own goals within the context of your greater goals, hopefully, but also its own individual goals. And they don't just stop moving because you've stopped moving and you've just decided to sit here like this, but all the cells in your body are still moving. They haven't stopped moving. The molecules have not stopped moving. The universe itself has not stopped moving. Everybody around you has not stopped moving. They're still moving. And they're pursuing goals. That's what they're doing. Every single one of them. None of it is automatic. So, in a relativistic sense, yes, we're inside of a clock. But in a fundamental sense, we're inside of someone. And we're composed of someones. And we're surrounded by someones. And everybody's got a goal. Every single one of these someones has a goal. And they're all pursuing their goals. And this is also why God's will be done. Is because we're all within God. Everyone else that's not God is within God. God is pursuing his goals. And so his world is our world is his body, and he's going to move it how he wants. He's going to do what he wants. You can either get on board, or you're going to decay, which is really what happens when entropy is what happens when we attempt to perceive staticness in a dynamic system. You look at it's just when a certain structure that you've defined changes away, basically. So all the sentient beings that make it up keep moving, and until that structure that you've defined no longer exists anymore. Hope this makes some sense. Let me know in the chat. This is tough because I'm trying to explain it in the context of what we already know, but it's also that's not really how you're supposed to do any of this. You're supposed to explain it in the fundamental context and then explain why this causes the perception of 4 dimensions of space-time, which we're going to get to in a minute. Hey guys, what's going on? What's up, memes? By the way, follow Memes of Destruction's YouTube channel. It's great. And but I was on there watching content today. We'll definitely appreciate it. Time is a perception of since and until something, which does seem to need both someone and a goal to be the something. Yes, exactly. It requires a goal. The perception of time requires a goal. And first, that's what it first requires. 3D printing. No. 3D printing, no. You can't build a house from I said that you have to build a house from I knew somebody was going to bring this up, and so I'm ready for you. But I said earlier you have to build a house from the foundation up. You can't build a house from the roof down. And now somebody's mentioning in the chat 3D printing. Watch them 3D print a house. They build it from the foundation up. They print it from the foundation up. But even if they were to print or build the roof first, like boxable houses or something, these modular houses, you build the roof first, and then you build the foundation, and then you build the walls, and then you put the roof on top. It's not a roof until it's been put on top of a house. So you still have to build from the foundation up, because the walls are not walls until they are walls. The roof is not a roof until it is a roof. And so that means it has to be stacked on top of the house. The walls have to be the framing of the house. Like if it's just a big flat sheet in a warehouse, waiting to be shipped to where you're going to build a house, then they're not walls yet, by definition. So this is why language is amazing, because the context of logic is contained within language, not within then we have, just because you call it a wall doesn't mean it is a wall. It's a flat sheet that you intend to use as a wall. But until it's erected on a foundation, and frames an interior space, like, it's not a wall. And same thing with a roof. You can't 3D print a roof first. You have to 3D print from the bottom up. Time flows, in my opinion. Time appears to flow. That's true. And you could say time flows, but like a vortex, which, if you're a guppy in a bucket and there's a vortex spinning around and around and around of the ether, and you're one of these fish, it appears like the ether is flowing by you, which is the same as, like, if you're in a river of time, it only flows one direction. It's like it's the same thing. It's just like you're backed up and you realize you're inside this single structure that's spinning around itself instead of this long stream. It's the self-contained stream, because it's someone. It's a self-referential information system. That's what a someone is. It's what a sentient singularity is. It's what existence is. It has to be, because if information exists in a system and ultimately there's only one existence, then that existence is ultimately entirely self-referential, which is this. And a self-referential information system is a self-aware system, and fundamentally. And so that's what we are. A sentient singularity, or a mind, is a loop of information. And it can be a loop within loops that's built on top of other loops. I need to make a visual animation of this, and eventually I want to. If you are good at animation, let me know, but maybe I can use some of these new AI tools that have come out even just this week for this. But I'm trying to get good at prompting. Prompting is like, I think our children will look at us prompting the same way that we would look at, like, our grandparents typing, or texting or something. It's just going to seem so limited and basic. We're going to be like, make a picture of a sunset with a tree and a tire swing or something. But people are going to get so good at prompting and using these tools. But really what it comes down to is you have to understand the chain of information and the order of the chain of information that is required to get what you want out of these prompts. It's like you have to know when to say, a man sitting by a fire dressed in red who is reading, versus like a man who is reading sitting next to a fire, his shirt is red. It's like you need to understand how the code kind of works, which I bet you will teach us an enormous amount about, like, the logic of language the more that you look into that, which eventually I plan to do. But for now, I'm still basic prompter. But okay, so let's go here. So Eric Weinstein has this idea for this observerse. Or actually, let's back up. This 14-dimensional observerse that we're going to get to, because that's basically, I think, a great term to kind of expand on space-time. But first, we need to understand that a mind, if you're a mind within a mind composed of minds, and that's the context of all of our perception, what is the most fundamental way of modeling a mind? The dimensions of mind. And according to Sentient Singularity Theory, it's this: the four primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. These are all four co-defining and simultaneously perceived and conceived perspectives. Because to perceive something as inside, if I say I'm inside my house, I think about myself inside my house. That means I also know what it would mean to be outside my house. That also indicates that I know what it means to be the house and to not be the house, and to be me and to not be me, separate and one. And they're co-defining. So in the context of nested sentient singularities or nested sentient beings, outside means separate from oneness. Separate from oneness. These two are used to define this. Inside means separate and oneness. Separate and oneness versus separate from oneness. Like imagine if unborn baby inside of a mom. Is it a separate body, or is it the mom's body? Everybody asks, constantly argues about this in politics. The answer is both. It's inside, separate. It is separate and one. Are your cells separate from you or one with you? They're inside of you. They are separate and one with you. A bacterial cell that is outside of you, or even blood cells that, let's say you bleed, you cut yourself and you bleed on, I don't know, the table. The cells in your blood are now outside of you. They're separate from one with you. They're no longer one with you. And oneness is outside and inside of separateness. Separate is inside or outside of oneness. So they're co-defining as simultaneously perceived and conceived perspectives. This is how we understand ourselves. It is how we orient within a fundamental, within the context of fundamental relationships, which is not relativistic relationships, not space-time relationships, like faster or bigger or smaller or brighter or heavier or weaker or stronger. Those are all on a spectrum. But we're talking about fundamental relationships of me versus you, me versus my cells versus, bacteria outside of my body. What is separate from me? What is one with me? This is about me orienting myself in a system, which meaning how does someone orient in a system, which, because it's someone, you're talking about a discrete singular structure in the context of a bunch of other singular structures. So there's things that are separate from and things that are one with other things, which are really beings in this fundamental context. This perception is the most fundamental understanding that we have. It is the beginning of our mind's understanding, because it's how our minds perceive ourselves in relationship with others. And in a fundamental way of like you versus me and me versus my cells, etc., and in a relativistic way, me versus the house that I'm in, and or me versus the car that I drive. But that's much more dependent upon, the goal of the question that you're asking. Is like, when you are in a car and somebody hits you, you say, somebody hit me, but they didn't really hit you. They hit the car hit their car hit your car. But, because it's maneuvering with you and they're maneuvering with their car, it's kind of like you've all both extended yourself with the car. And, it's why people feel so violated when they have a break-in into their house versus something getting stolen outside their house. It's like, it's just different. It's like the boundary of yourself is created when you lock the door. It's like goals define our relativistic boundaries of kind of our sense of self. Not physical feeling, but kind of like emotional feeling. But then there's fundamental just which is just your body, which is your assembly of cells that makes up your body, is your fundamental limit internally. Externally, it extends. My limit extends into the structure that is my marriage or my family, because my wife's feelings impact my feelings, and it's impossible for it not to be the case, because of unified goals that we have that bind us together by feeling. Our feelings bind us together, are what dictate these boundaries of being, and but our goals are also framing of these things. So hopefully that, and there's so much context that I need to that I want to explain, and I hope I'm not just breezing through so much and just sounds like I'm rambling. But these 4 primary perspectives, inside, outside, separate, and oneness, these are why we perceive 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. They are why we perceive 4 first person directions, I guess. I don't know what they're even called, of left, right, up, and down. Okay? Left, right, up, and down is just the first person perspective of the third person relativistic 4 directions, or which is north, south, east, and west. And so it's like, if you're looking at it, the system that you're within from the system, or looking at yourself from the perspective of the system that you're in, then you look at it from north, south, east, and west. If you look at it from a God's eye view, you could say. But if you're looking at it from the inside out versus the outside in, which is from your perspective, then it's up, down, left, and right. But this is also why we perceive 4 fundamental forces in physics, which is gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, and the weak nuclear force. And it's also why we perceive addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and even the symmetry structures in the standard model itself. Let me pull this up. Let me show you this. So here, it's also why we perceive 4 kind of states of matter, and people will say, oh, there's more than 4 states of matter. And yeah, there's fundamentally 4, and then it kind of scales up, and you can get to 6 basically. But what they are is these. I put them in the thumbnail. Here's the symmetry structures in the standard model, by the way. You can see electrons basically kind of centered four kind of fourfold symmetry structure, but you can also back up and you can see it as kind of from a kind of electromagnetism, strong force, weak force, and gravity, but there's particles associated, bosonic particles associated with it. But it's a little bit tough to use our current understanding in order to show this, because our current understanding is that there's a Higgs boson that is kind of probably a misinterpretation, and also a graviton that is very small, that is proposed and assumed to eventually be found, which doesn't exist. You are you are inside the graviton. That's what is the reality. If the graviton is anything, it's the universe itself, and we're inside of it. But yes, this is my working models, I guess. So it's very disorganized in some ways. But here, where is this? Where's the matter? I don't know. Cannot find it right now, but here, let's just look here. You go to sentientsingularity.com, it's on there. I need to, every year or so, I make a new Excel sheet. I take the most updated models, I put them on a new Excel sheet, and I save the old one. And that one has been going for at least like 3 years now because I had a kid and I wasn't working on it, making as many models for a bit. But that one it's got way too many tabs. But if you go to models on here, and some of I'm not going to say that all of these are correct. Some of these are just models I made in the past that I would do differently today. But I always try to keep the most updated ones kind of towards the top. But if you look at this, 4 primary perspectives of matter, we say, yes, there's it's solid, liquid, and gas. Okay. But there's a 4th one, which is sentience. It's the internal perspective of the unifying narrative of all 3 of these. Are you a solid, a liquid, or gas? It's like you're none of these, but you're composed of all of these. You're an animated being. And depending on the angle that you look at that animated being, you're going to see a solid, liquid, or gas. Depending on the assembly structure of the molecules, how the molecules are interacting with each other, kind of according to the angle in which you look at it. And it's kind of like those sculptures where like it's got all these like things, just random bits of trash, and then you kind of like rotate around it, and once you hit a certain angle, all of a sudden you get a picture. Depending on the angle you're looking at it, kind of, which also is dependent upon a goal. It's going to depend on, and it's not just your goal, it's the goals of all these beings that are, relevant to the moment that you're experiencing. It's all their perspectives are feeding into kind of how the state of matter is perceived. But what's fascinating is when I was first kind of coming up with my cosmological verse model, I started just screwing around with like entanglement structures of these 3x3 matrices. And let's see, do I have it here? Yes, I do. And so what I did was I was like, okay, gas is like a bunch of like little singularities that are not entangled, really. Like they're free. They're not, imagine each one of these blue ones is a singularity. This would be like nothing. It's like an empty set. There's nothing there. Empty space, quote unquote, but that's not even a good way to think about it. And then a little bit, the next level of entanglement is you get these strings of entanglement. Like they're directionally entangled. These molecules, you could say, are directionally entangled, but they're not all entangled with each other, but some of them are entangled with each other according to a specific direction. What's interesting is it forms these strings. And if you look at like all these little magnets that are individually singular units, but are all together, if you pull them, it forms these strings. Okay? This is probably what happens with water molecules. And the reason why I think this, and I don't know if this is actually true or not, this is a prediction, and it's probably known. It's just I don't know it because I'm not a chemist, or and I didn't take like upper level physics classes. But what's the magnetic attraction between all these little magnets together is probably like the equivalent of capillary action. It's like when you fill up your water cup and a little bit above the rim, and like it still holds together, or if you push a drop of water towards another drop of water and they touch each other and all of a sudden they clump together. That's exactly what happens with magnets. And so it's a very good, I don't even know if it's a metaphor or if it's just a scaled up representation of what actually a liquid is. And I don't know I wonder if all liquids have like some type of capillary action. Let's look it up. capillary action? Movement of a liquid through narrow spaces. Okay, well, that's really not exactly what it is, but it that circumstance uses what is capillary action. What is the cause of capillary action? Combination of adhesion, attraction between liquid and a solid, and cohesion, attraction between liquid molecules. That's what it is. It's cohesion that really is causing it. It's molecules within molecules attraction to other molecules. But that's what this is, and it's interesting that it forms that same thing as like strings. But if you entangle it even more, another level, they're all entangled with each other. They're all interlocking here as solid. Imagine trying to like rotate one of these now. It's like all of them have to rotate at once or move these. It's like if I pulled on this one, all of these would follow it. I would just pull on it and I'd pull this one out and these would stay. If I pulled on this one, only this one would move. If I pull on this one, this whole thing is going to move. It's a solid. It's entangled on kind of four points of contact, I guess you could say. It looks, at least in this two-dimensional model. Not on the sides, but you can see it on the center. But then if we entangle it even more, which I was like, what would happen if I entangle it even more? You get this overlapping structures that occur, and you get basically this. And then this became that, which is the kind of the assembly structure of what I call a cosmological verse. But this, like I said, space-time is tough because what we're perceiving is dependent on our goal. Time, space, or matter are all the same thing. They're just relativistic perspectives of the state of an kind of like the entanglement state of a bunch of sentient singularities, essentially. And that's all it is. I mean, but this four-dimensional perspective that we always have is due to the constraint of our mind of inside, outside, separate, and oneness, the four primary perspectives. That's why we see length, width, height, time. That's space-time. And but it's because this manifold structure that exists that allows us to interpret the information, that allows us to fundamentally navigate, is also what kind of allows us to relativistically navigate length, width, height, and time. X, Y, Z, and time. Or X, Y, Z, and change, you could say. And length, width, height, and time. It's the same exact thing as like up, down, left, and right versus north, south, east, and west. It's a God's eye view. In outside in-looking perspective, looking at yourself from a third-person perspective versus looking out from a first-person perspective. But this four-dimensional perception is due to the structure of mind. And what happens when you have a mind within a mind, you're a mind within a mind, and the mind that you're within is moving, and you're moving, is you have this overlap of two four-dimensional structures. And then you get what I think, I'm not going to say that this is 100% true because I don't want to tell you what the definition of Eric Weinstein's observerse is because it's his term. But what I think this structure is, this 14-dimensional structure that is two spaces, as he's described it as before. He's described it as like the court and the stands, kind of like using a metaphor of like a stadium. It's two spaces, he says. It's two beings. This comes from, or at least the perception of this comes from two beings. That's what I'll say. The one that is within and the one that is without. The one that we're inside of and ourselves. And so what you have is you have this. You have the 4 dimensions of the mind that we're within, inside, outside, separate, and oneness, and the 4 dimensions of the mind that we are, inside, outside, separate, and oneness. Or you have the 4 dimensions of our mind, inside, outside, separate, and oneness, and the 4 dimensions of, or primary perspectives, which are dimensions of the minds that are within us, your cells, inside, outside, separate, and oneness. So this could be your cells, or a cell within you, and this could be you, or this could be God, and this could be us. So it just depends on if you how you want to imagine it. But this one is this being is inside, this mind is, or this someone is inside of this someone. And so you have these 2 4-dimensional overlapping manifold structures, which are information processing structures. And the one within, which is us looking out, we perceive length, width, height, and time when we look out at our world, which is we're looking out at the mind that we're within from within the mind that we're within. We see length, width, height, and time. But really, fundamentally, what's happening is when we're perceiving causality, it's not just length, width, height, and time. It's previous location, current location, new location, and time. So it's forwards and backwards is kind of the way in which we navigate truly fundamentally, forwards and backwards in the context of a goal. So forwards towards a new location, we could say, which is a new spot in the mind that we're within. And so every single one of these beings, every mind has in this structure, in this relationship, has an objective constraint, a subjective constraint, and 2 degrees of freedom. So the 2 degrees of freedom for the mind that is inside of the other mind, so us within the universe or ourselves within us, is we can go forwards towards our goal or backwards away from our goal. We're always in our current state, which is our current location in the context of being within another being, our spot within the assembly structure that it makes up the body of the other mind that we're within. And then the objective constraint is a constraint that is beyond us, which is time, which is in our circumstance, which is change beyond us. Our current location is dependent on us. Our subjective constraint is something we cannot escape, but it's us that is the cause of this circumstance that we cannot escape. That's why it's a subjective constraint. Then there's the objective constraint, which is causes, like, it's a constraint that we cannot escape, but it's coming from outside of us. It's not coming from us. It's coming from someone outside of us, which is change beyond us, time. So this is how we maneuver towards a new location that is, towards our goal. We are always in our current location in relationship with our goal, and we are and ourselves, and we are moving away from our previous location in the context of our goal. And time is change that is happening beyond us as we navigate forwards towards our goal, or backwards away from our goal if we get cowardly. The being that we are within, this is space-time. It's a more fundamental look at space-time, but it's about locations. So it's space-time. You have 3 location null dimensions, which is like length, width, height, or spatial. Locational is spatial dimensions, and then you have time. But the being that we're within, God, or us, if this is ourselves instead of us, then we're talking about us here, or if this is us, then we're talking about God here, or the universe. They have the same exact structure. Inside, outside, separate, and oneness, 4-dimensional or mental manifold that is an orientation manifold, and it has a subjective constraint and an objective constraint, subjective constraint and objective constraint, and 2 degrees of freedom in relationship with the goal. The 2 degrees of freedom are a future moment and a past moment, which is kind of think about it as the position of your body. Like if you're, let's say this is your cells, it's the perspective of your cells. They're going about their goals. How they do that in terms of the context of being within your body is moving from, I don't know, a white blood cell moves from one part of your body to another, okay? But, which is really like, it's changing the other cells that it's around. But how we change in relationship to the cell that is within us is we change we move our own body, okay? Which moves their entire world. So I move my arm. I move everything about any kind of movement that you make, okay? Towards a goal, of your own self, towards your goal, is moving the world of the being that you're within, which means that you are space to your cells. To your cells, you are space itself, okay? And so if you look at like what is the objective constraint of a being, of the exterior being, it is space, because you are space. It is space. If you're the exterior being, then you are space. You are space to your cells. God is space to us. The universe is space to us. And it moves towards a future moment defined by a goal, and away from a previous moment defined by a goal, and it's always in its present moment. It's always in its present state. This overlap causes a 6-dimensional, I guess, ring almost, like where you meet. And that causes all kinds of perceptions of a 6-dimensional manifold, which is, I think, a Calabi-Yau manifold. This is what causes a Calabi-Yau manifold, which is an example of a Calabi-Yau manifold is primary and secondary colors, or the order of operations in mathematics. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Or your limbs, when you look at your limbs and you say arms and legs, hands and feet, fingers and toes. Or if you look at your hands and you're like hands and feet, toes and fingers, or fingers and toes, and fingernails and toenails. It's like this. It's adding to the kind of definitional space that you can define within space-time, is like this 6-dimensional manifold, Calabi-Yau manifold structure that is caused by this overlapping 4D manifolds. But if you really start counting the dimensions, then what you get this is 6, and this is 4, and this is 4, and then when they combine together, they get 6. So 4 plus 4 plus 6 is 14. There's multiple different ways to count this, but you'll get the same thing. You can even see this in kind of like when you're looking at the standard model, which is like, you could say graviton, universe / graviton. And you, me / Higgs kind of. So I can't get too into it tonight on like what exactly these mean, but this is the universe as a whole. And this is like kind of an interior being, and so this is what's between us. It's not, as people will say that this is just like nonsense, but remember, it's not, because the structure that we're perceiving here is coming from the mind, and the mind and its interaction with the mind that we're within. And so you'll see this kind of symmetry structures everywhere that you look. So if you look at it, no matter how you look at it, if you look at this symmetrically, you'll get like 14. It's like 4 and 5 and 5, or 1 and 4 and 4 and 4 and 1. or 14. So basically, when I say you have to look at things kind of objectively or fundamentally, you have to look for symmetry structures. So you can't you have to break this down in a way that is symmetrical. That's why these three are the ways to do it. I don't think that there's another way to break this down symmetrically. In just the way that it's laid out here. But yeah, symmetry is how you make sense of relationships between differentiation, and because your mind is a symmetry structure, it's how it makes sense of things, and it organizes information, because to do so you need to differentiate information. You need to take information and then put it into this manifold structure that spits out more information from a single experience and organizes it into, via differentiation, hierarchization, or basically understanding causation, and differentiation, causation, and categorization. So basically, which is how you get that also Calabi-Yau manifold. It's the same thing. That's why you get this binary triadic structure, which is this 6-dimensional structure. It's 6, the number 6, because you need a structure that is able to allow for you to perceive causality first, which is like past, present, future, and categorization, it's like organization of information beyond differentiation. So, but differentiation is a 2-dimensional action, I guess you could say. Categorization is a 3-dimensional action. And so is the perception of causation or hierarchy in some ways. That's why when we think about generations, we'll say things like parent, child, grandchild, or grandparent, parent, child, or child, parent, grandparent. And then it just kind of repeats, and it's like great grandparent. And so you need this 6-dimensional structure in order to do all of these different things, differentiate, organize into a causative hierarchy. Because if you think about what is a parent versus a child, okay, that's differentiation. But everybody's a parent and a child, other than God. So to say, am I a parent or am I a child? If you have a kid, you're both. But so to kind of order this requires an additional perspective added in, which kind of creates 3. If this makes any sense. I know I'm not doing a great job at this, but I wanted to do this partially to practice myself, because I haven't talked about this stuff in a long time. And it's tough because it's so goal dependent. So it's like, which one is the exterior mind versus the interior mind? It's like, you pick which one you're going to think about yourself from the perspective of, it's like, are we thinking about ourselves inside the universe, or are we thinking about ourselves inside of us? You have to pick, and both of them are legitimate. Yeah, let me go to the chat. This is way cool. Awesome, I'm glad. Please hit the like button, by the way, if you think it's way cool. I have many gods, but if I had a god, gravity is that. Gravity is the movement of God, or it's the movement of God's creation, which is the second being which is the second being to ever exist, which is the first being to ever be created, which is a sentient universe, you could say. When the universe moves, that's gravity. That's what it is. It's not It's not a complicated, mysterious thing, actually. The graviton is supposed to be the force carrier particle of gravity, and it's assumed by physicists today to be this very small particle that is very hard to see because it's probably very, very small. But that's not true. It's that you're inside of it. You're a fish looking for water while you're in the ocean, or you're a bear in the forest. You can't see the forest through the trees. That's what's going on with the graviton. You're inside the graviton. And because think about what if gravity is due to the momentum or the movement of existence or of the universe itself, which that's what it is. Think about what gravity does and what it is, and how it seems to be able to speed up and slow down. It's just the force it's the motivative force of matter, basically. Motivating force of matter. That's not even the best way to describe it, but that's what it is. It's what's moving everything. Think about the universe. Everything is being moved by gravity and sentience. But gravity is just our perception of the intentional motion of a sentient being from within the sentient being. If you're a cell inside of a body, inside of your body, like think about the perspective of being a blood cell inside of my body, and I start spinning around. My daughter, she just spins and spins around. She thinks it's so funny to get dizzy and then fall over and almost hit her head on the wall. It gives me anxiety. But imagine being a blood cell inside of her body as she's just spinning and spinning, spinning, spinning. That's gravity. It's the movement of the universe as a whole. It's the spin of the universe as a whole. Spin is the most objective movement, most fundamental motion, and it's the only fundamental metaphysical motion because you're spinning around yourself. All information is contextualized around the self. So that means it's like spun. Information is spun around the self. That's what it means for information to be contextualized around the self or by the self. It's metaphysically or super literally spun around the self. Super literally is like a term I use for something that's metaphysically true. It's like people use literally for context that can be perceived, in relativity, but super literally is it's informationally true. Something that's super literally true is just metaphysically informationally true. Whereas literal truth would be what's the shape of the earth if you're in it versus what's the shape of the earth if you're outside it, it's so subjective. Even what time is it? It is it's literally 10:37 p.m. Central Time. Is that true? Sure, I guess. How fundamental is that? Okay. I have many gods. You have one God. I will say this. And there's no way for there to be more than one God. God is the initial, all-encompassing, eternal being, eternal someone that is existence itself, sentient existence itself. There's only one existence, so there's only one God. And God is existence, the self-referential information system that is existence itself. And it is sentient, just like you and me. We're all within God. You can never see God in totality because you are within God. It's like your cells cannot see you in totality. They'd have to leave your body and look back. But the thing is that while they could do that, technically, we can't do that because we cannot be outside of God because there's nothing outside of God because God is existence itself. And anything outside of existence is non-existent and non-existence doesn't exist. So You can look to language, to the logic of language, to try and figure this stuff out, because it's really like the best tool that you have to like confirm whether or not some thought is logical or not. But you just need to have the context, the fundamental context, to frame whatever thought that you're having, which is that you're a sentient being inside of another sentient being that is made up of a bunch of other sentient beings, or at least that is stacked on top of a body that is an assembly structure made up of a bunch of sentient beings, or that is a structure that is an assembly of a bunch of other sentient beings. So you are not an assembly structure of a bunch of other sentient beings, but you are stacked on top, but your someoneness is stacked on top of a body that is composed of an assembly structure of a bunch of other sentient beings. So every sentient singularity is a singular being. It's indivisible. You are indivisible. God is indivisible. He can partition bits of his will into other sentient singularities within himself, but he would still exist even if all of us disappeared, or if we were destroyed, all of us, he would still exist. And if all your cells were destroyed, you would still exist. You would not be embodied anymore, but your sentience would still exist, and you would persist in heaven, but you would not be able to change anymore. Or you could persist in heaven. Whether or not you do, it's probably up to God. But the default is for you to continue to exist. It's not the default is not for you to evaporate and no longer exist. That would probably take an intentional action, or it would take such an unraveling of your own mind and sense of self that when you are no longer embodied, you lost your sense of self, because the only sense of your entire sense of self was dependent upon being embodied. Maybe like Sam Harris. I don't want to presuppose. I hope Sam Harris goes to heaven and has his sentience saved. But if you listen to what he says about consciousness, and he thinks that it is an illusion of an illusion, it's just like it's so ungrounded that the only thing that might ground him is like his feelings that are coming from him being embodied. But once those are gone, will he still exist? I don't know. I hope so. I don't have anything against Sam Harris, even though he's very, very wrong on a lot. It is amazing how intelligent he can sound and how wise he can sound as he says things that seem to have no basis in our experience, or even in his experience, it seems, which is very odd. Like, how can you say that you don't actually exist? Consciousness is an illusion. Illusion to who? Like, there can't be an illusion if there isn't a perceiver to perceive an illusion. So again, like I said, you can use language to kind of test the logic of these things, and that's one of those ones that if you think about the logic of the language of that statement, it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense at all. Okay. I call it levels. Well, me and two, now I know only life. Even though this is not the planet of life, but truly of death, think of all that have lived and died so far. Why is this the planet of death? Well, if most people, sentiences, if most people are most someones are saved, if the sentience of most someones is saved, or are saved, and continue to persist and exist, and even perceive, like, beyond being embodied, which is like in the afterlife, then how is this the planet of death? There is a lot of death, and that's caused by kind of humans, which is death is like, it's not just death like an animal dying. Death is the metaphysical death, is like, it's different from just physical death. It's the decoupling and decoherence of information that of the strings of information that form the loops of sentient beings. So it's like if you're a loop of information that is a string, like imagine the string gets cut, like that's death. That's not the same as physical death, which physical death alone doesn't necessarily mean the string gets cut. It just means the string stops changing. It's like when if you're a sentient file on the computer, at the end of you're writing a story, God's writing a story, you're writing it together in a Word document. You write one sentence, God writes the next sentence. You write the next sentence, God writes the next sentence. You write the next sentence, God writes the next sentence. That's basically what's happening with our lives. But you are this file. And that's kind of self-writing itself a little bit, but also God is like, outside the computer writing it. Half of it, at least, maybe more. And then it comes to an end. God's like, he gets the last sentence and he just writes the last sentence and the end. He can write the end whenever he wants. And then he closes the file and saves it. You're still there. You just you're not changing anymore. But if the file gets corrupted and you try and save a corrupted file, you can't even save a corrupted file. The information is gone. Because the coherence of the information has been interrupted. That's what happens when a file gets corrupted. And so that's death. Like actual death. It's not physical death. Like that's just the cycle of life. We just think that, it's the end. A lot of people do. I used to think it was the end. It doesn't make any sense that it's the end. I don't know for sure because I've never died, as far as I know. If it's true that I haven't died as far as I know, then we should assume that I have not died. I know people talk about like past lives and stuff. Don't worry about it. So that's my answer. It's compatible with sentient singularity theory, but it would be not dependent upon anything that we could predict. It would be dependent on choices that happen on the other side of the metaphysical curtain, if it does occur. There's a guy named Matthias DeStefano. You can look him up. I don't watch his content really, but I've seen like bits and pieces of interviews with him, and he claims to remember all his past lives. I'm very skeptical of it. I try and give people the benefit of the doubt because I am claiming that I have like a fundamental theory of existence, and I understand why people would be skeptical of that. It's quite a statement. So if somebody says, I remember all my past lives, I don't know which one actually seems more profound, but it's not just like why. It's not just that he claims that makes me skeptical. It's what he says about them that I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just skeptical. But that doesn't mean it's not true. Maybe some people do remember their past lives. I don't. If I had one, but it doesn't matter. How does our will direct or control ourselves? So much. It has so much to do with how our cells act. If I tell my cells I want to grab that water bottle, then they're going to all get in line to do it. If your cells don't submit themselves to your will and they try and pursue their own will, even at the expense of your will, you get cancer. That's what cancer is. And It's when cells pursue individual goals that are against the greater goal that is your goal, um, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Also, and I've talked about this before, is like you can think yourself, if you think about having like a rash or like or pain or something, like you can literally, like your cells will start to manifest that rash physically. This happens all the time with people, and it's happened with me before. I've shared a funny story about it before. I don't know how much I'm going to get into it here, but um, you can. I've talked about it many times. It's just going to take too much time to get into it. Let's check the time and how long we've been going. We're going 2 hours, but let's just say once I convinced myself that I thought I had every STD in the world, and there was no reason for me to have any STDs. By the way, I don't have any STDs at all. And I'm married now, and I don't even share water bottles with people because I'm like, I made it. I don't even want to like catch a cold sore from somebody by sharing a water bottle. But there was a time where I thought I might have one, and I thought about it so much, and I Googled, STD, which is the worst thing you could possibly do before going to the doctor. And I just had paranoia for days, and it just led to me focusing till I literally developed physical symptoms. Every physical symptom: pain, needed to pee like every 5 minutes, and a visible rash. And as soon as I went to the doctor, they told me, they were like, "That's not an STD. That's nothing." And like, we look at STDs all day, and they were like, the guy was just laughing at me, and he was like, "This happens to people. As soon as you relax and you believe me and trust me that like that's not anything to worry about, that it will probably all disappear. All your symptoms will disappear." He was 100% right. And I got tested, and I had nothing, and he reassured me, and I even had him bring in like another doctor to get a second opinion while he was standing there, and which was just kind of very funny. But and they, like, it was a woman too, and she walks in, and he was like, "You really still want a second opinion?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Okay, drop them." And she laughed, and he laughed, and they were both like, that's not an STD. They were not laughing at my physical body. They were laughing at me being paranoid. But yeah, it was, all my symptoms immediately went away. Why does that happen? Because to some degree, your focus dictates like your goals to your cells and to yourself. Because if you can't, like, if you're focused on something, you can't have any other goal other than what you're focused on. And so if you're focused on like, even like pain, if you're like focused on back pain, you can like develop real physical back pain. It's not in your head, but it does come from your mind. If you think you have a rash, or you think that you have, this is why, like, as a little kid, I realized that if I could think myself into being sick sometimes. If I like wanted to not go to school, I could like think myself into actually feeling sick, and then I would always regret it because I would actually oftentimes get sick. But I would like want to like, have a cold so that I didn't have to go to school. But then when you actually have a cold, it sucks. I didn't really want to have a cold. I wanted to not go to school. But if you think about it too much as your focus of like being sick, and focused on just like acting sick and kind of put yourself in the mindset of being sick, you can think yourself into being sick. Because your cells just start to assume that this state is the goal, that pain is the goal, that rash is a goal, that your feeling sick is a goal. Because what else would happen? What else is going to happen? Your mind and your goals dictate the actions of your cells. That has to be the case. Otherwise, you can't grab a water bottle. Because who's really moving? My cells are moving when I move. I hope that makes sense. I hope it was funny too. Very wise. You are right. By definition, you are so good. Love it. Thank you. Please hit the like button. And subscribe if you're not subscribed. I'm really trying to get to 3,000 subscribers. It's been too many years and too many videos for me to not be at 3,000 subscribers. Subscriber count is not my goal on this. Otherwise, I wouldn't do the 2 to 3 hour long live streams late at night on a weeknight. But I would just be releasing like 10 to 15 minute videos, multiple times a week. But I do this for you because it gives me meaning to interact with you guys. Seeing view counts, seeing subscriber count, there's no someone there that keeps me feeling like this is meaningful. But if there's one person in the live chat, and believe me, in the beginning, there was oftentimes one person in the live chat, sometimes even today, towards the end, especially if there's an audio issue, there's one person left in the live chat, and I will continue for that one person. But if I could get a million views a video, and I would get so bored within like 4 videos. It would feel just meaningless. Tyler, question. Do you know what infinity sounds like? I know what infinity is. If it's anything, really, is infinity is something that has a beginning and no end. So infinity in a number sequence, an infinite amount of quantities, starts with 1 and goes up and continues infinitely, adds another infinitely. When people say it goes infinitely, negative numbers, infinite positive numbers, and I used to speak like this too, but each one is still it's just starting with 1 or, and adding another. We just put a negative in front of it sometimes. It doesn't make a difference. But infinity is something that has a beginning, and it's a sequence that has a beginning and no end. That's what it is. Or something that is infinite has a beginning and no end. So if somebody is created and never dies, that person's infinite. But in there, like it would live for an infinitely, live on infinitely, I guess you could say. But then eternally or eternity has no beginning and no end. So God is eternal. Creation, or the logos, the sentient universe, is infinite. It grows infinitely. We are finite. Our sentience can continue can persist infinitely, but it had a beginning. We did not always exist, but we can exist if where sentience gets saved into the save space, which is heaven, what theists would call heaven, then we would persist on infinitely. But we had a beginning, so we don't exist eternally. Eternal has no beginning and no end. It's different. And the reason why you can deduce this, even though people will disagree on the definitions, is eternity, that which is eternal and that which is infinite. Infinite and eternal have to have 2 different definitions. Otherwise, there's no point to having 2 different words. So if finite means has a beginning and has an end, and eternal means no beginning and no end, then infinite means has a beginning and no end. So finite, infinite, eternal. All have to mean different things. Cannot mean the same thing. People use infinite and eternal interchangeably a lot, and it should not be used interchangeably. They're different words. There's different words that exist for different concepts. Otherwise, just have one word if it's one concept. You don't need two different words for the same concept. If that was how language truly worked, then language wouldn't work. There's no such thing as a synonym, as a true synonym. A synonym is that which is, unless synonym means a word that is similar, which is really what it means if we're going to keep the word. But if it means a word that is means the same thing as another word, then that doesn't actually exist, and therefore we shouldn't even have the word synonym. So what does synonym mean? It means a word that is similar. But if you look it up, I bet you right now, it'll say synonym. Definition of synonym. Definition. A word or phrase that means exactly or nearly the same as another word or phrase in the same language. For example, shut is a synonym of close. No, this is an incorrect definition that is coming up on Google. This definition is fundamentally incorrect. It is a word, it can be a word or phrase that means nearly the same or similar, is attributed to a similar concept, but it cannot be a word or phrase that means exactly the same. It cannot. And how you also can know that this is an incorrect definition is because there's two definitions given here. It either means a word that means exactly the same as another word or nearly the same as another word. Those are totally different concepts. Nearly versus exactly. Those are not close. They are entirely different concepts. Something that is the same as something else. Something that is similar to something else. Very different. That definition is false. It just is. We go to. But if we look up like shut versus close, definition. And I understand we use them interchangeably, but that's not the point. Shut and close can be used interchangeably to mean covering or opening, but shut is often more forceful and abrupt, while close is more neutral. That's the difference. Or maybe it's even different than that. It's like maybe it has to do with the perspective of the person doing the action. My daughter just slams doors. She shuts all the doors, or closes all the doors. I don't know exactly what the best term is to use, but one of them is the best term. That's the point. And she every time she does it, like she'll walk in the mornings when I'm still in bed, sometimes, or if I'm getting dressed or something, and she'll just shut the bathroom door in front of me, and she'll look at me and she'll go, close. But she doesn't look at what she's doing, and she just pushes on it. And I'm always so worried her fingers are going to get caught in the door. My wife and I just literally close our eyes and pray every time my daughter closes the doors. But I need to think more about like, what is the difference between close and shut? Shut is more informal and forceful version of close. So it must be force, like the amount of force. People say shut the door, like implies like urgency, versus close the door. It's like shut the door, you know? Which one would you say in a hurry? But if we look to no true synonym. Synonyms, okay, wait. English. No two words are truly identical in every context due to subtle differences in connotation, usage, and origin. However, some pairs like flammable and inflammable are considered by some to be true synonyms because they're 100% interchangeable. Inflammable and flammable. Inflammable? Easily set on fire. You would think it's the opposite of flammable. But I would just go on to say that inflammable is not a word that is necessary. Like it's a redundant term that didn't need to be created. And that's why nobody uses it. Right? Like, when was the last time you heard somebody say inflammable? No, I've never heard anybody use that term ever. Because everybody just says it's flammable. Because why would you literally add effort, time, just to say the exact same thing by adding in to the beginning of flammable? Doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I would say those are not interchangeable words. Like, because one of them existed prior to the other. Like, they didn't come about independently. Like, how could you make the word inflammable without the word flammable? Why would you make the word inflammable if the word flammable already exists and they mean exactly the same thing? It's like this term that drives me insane lately is, I don't know if you guys have heard people say colorways in like gear reviews and things like that, clothing reviews or whatever, in the past like 6 months or so. Apparently this term comes back every few years, but I had never heard it before this year. And then all of a sudden everyone was saying colorways. Like, this new pocket knife comes in 3 different colorways. The new Jeep Grand Cherokee comes in 3 different colorways. Why not just say 3 different colors or color schemes? You know, it was so annoying. I hated it. And everybody started saying it. Everyone. And nobody was saying it a year ago. And then everybody started saying it like 4 months ago. And you just heard it a couple times. And then it was everywhere. It was like, none of y'all were using the term colorways a year ago. And we all got along just fine. Like, why do we need it now? It was just trendy. Colorways, definite. Any of a range of combinations of colors. It's like a color combo. Okay, so I guess a colorway is a single term for color combination. So maybe it's not a bad term. It's like an automobile, the term that came from automatic and mobile, or like instead of saying flying car, we'll eventually say something else. We won't say flying car, but we'll start off by saying flying car. So maybe you start off saying color schemes, or color options, color combos, but then eventually it becomes colorways. I didn't realize it was a single term, a single word. I thought it was 2 words. It was a 2-word term, but it's 1. It makes more sense. I still hate it. It is all moving without changing. What is all moving without changing? The universe? It is changing. It's changing it's changing because all the beings within it are changing, and what it's doing is changing. Just like you are still you, but you move and change position, and so do all the beings that are within you as you do so. Impossible. It seems that it would take a lot of extra energy to get rid of any energy here. I don't know what you're referring to. I don't know what, like, energy is. There's no getting rid of energy. Like, there's growing energy, but there's also like there's only a finite amount of energy, which is really like 1. It's like God, but it just depends on how you look at it. But the that which animates, that which is animated, that which, is the cause of energy, which is that which is willful, are someones. And the more someones that we make, the more will can be, or more wills can be manifested. In some ways, that is like fundamental energy. But then there's a relativistic perspective of energy, which is really mass, which is matter, which is space-time, which is just a relativistic perspective of structure beyond us. Because energy is matter, and matter is space. Space is time to some degree. That's not. I'm not concerned about the physicists' current understanding of energy. I'm not saying that it's false. It's just relativistic. Sentient singularity theory is a fundamental metaphysics theory. It can give the context in which the perception of relativistic energy is perceived, and why you would perceive certain properties of it. Like conservation of energy, but you conserve energy because we're all within one being. There's only one existence. It's entirely self-referential, and information is energy. Like there's no difference there either. So, it's self-contained. There is no loss of energy. But you could say there's a growth in fundamental wills, which is in some ways you could say is growth in fundamental energy, but not in a physics perspective of energy. I don't know how I got to you, but I need this. I appreciate it. What do you think of AI Atlas? I will subscribe tonight. Please subscribe. Yeah. Share if you find this valuable. I know I ranted or rambled a lot. It's tough to reconcile or to explain fundamental structures and fundamental processes in the context of terms that describe relativistic structures and relativistic contexts. And if I were to truly do this properly, what I would just do is I would just start with, imagine you're God. You have to make someone else within you. How do you do it? And then we just go from there and we just build. We don't start with what is space-time. Because space-time you don't even have the concept of space-time if we're going to do this really properly yet. But we perceive space-time, we talk about it, we've defined it, and we have a scientific narrative surrounding it. And so it is important to link your more fundamental structures to less fundamental structures. But really how you do that effectively is by showing how those less fundamental structures inevitably emerge from or arise from the more fundamental structures. You can't get a more fundamental structure. You cannot deduce a more fundamental structure from less fundamental structures. You can only construct less fundamental structures from more fundamental structures. This is why they can't create a theory of everything by trying to combine gravity and with the other three fundamental forces. Even though there's something there that they see as like true, what the truth is that a fundamental theory will contextualize gravity and the three other fundamental forces in a more fundamental context, or in relationship with each other within a more fundamental context. So they are not each other's context, though. And so you can't build a fundamental theory from less fundamental theories. You have to construct a fundamental theory and see if it naturally builds towards less fundamental theories that we already have, like the standard model and the observables of quantum mechanics and general relativity. Things like that. So you kind of have to like start with an assumption and see where it leads. Like logically, where does the constraints of that assumption logically lead to? You can't just be like, well, I'm going to try and combine quantum mechanics and general relativity, or gravity and the other three fundamental forces. You can't do that, because they're unified in a more fundamental context. They're related to each other within them being unified in a more fundamental context. They're not unified into each other alone. So when people say like Bernardo Kastrup says this, he'll be like, not everything is conscious, but everything is in consciousness. People will be so confused by that. The only way to make that make sense, and the only way in which it does make sense and that it is true also, is that this water bottle is not conscious, but the concept of it is within my consciousness. It's within my mind, and the definition of it, the perception of it. But also there's molecules and stuff in it that exist outside of my own existence, at least we assume. And that means how could they also exist in consciousness if they're not in my consciousness or any other human's consciousness, because they're in God's consciousness and their own consciousness, because a molecule is probably sentient, at least some of them. And a hadron, proton, which is proton and neutron, those are probably sentient according to Sentient Singularity Theory. So, like, you need those contexts, but everything is within the consciousness or the mind or the being that is the initial sentience, the all-encompassing sentience, which is sentient existence itself, which is God. It's a single someone, inevitably. God could not choose not to exist. It's a self-referential information system that is entirely self-contained and all-encompassing. That means it's entirely self-referential and inclusive of all information that is within it, which is also all information that exists. So that's a being that is entirely self-aware because it's self-referential, and also all-knowing constantly. As it makes more to know, it's still all-knowing because it knows exactly what's going on within it always, as it adds more and does more with, inside itself. It also is constantly perceiving what is happening within itself. God is like a giant inverted eyeball in some ways. Like he's just looking in because there's nothing to look outwards at. So he looks in. There's a universe. There's this model it's used in Chris Langan's the Wheeler Eye universe. Used in Chris Langan's CTMU papers that he's written. It's also used by Eric Weinstein in his geometric unity paper. It's the eye that is the universe looking at itself. It's the I and you. I from one perspective, you from another perspective, examining itself, like looking at itself. This is like God, but this is also like you. The universe viewed as a self-excited circuit. Starting small, it grows. But see, what's stupid about that type? It's not stupid, but the problem with it is that when you say something like it's a self-excited circuit, or Eric Weinstein said like, how do you get like the hands drawing hands like painting that or drawing that who did it? It was it was oh my gosh, Etcher. By the way, I have an interview that I did of the the basically the apprentice of MC Escher, and I have it recorded, and I have not posted it because he wanted me to make a video about my interview of him, not to post the interview. And I'm gonna ask him. I'll eventually do that if he doesn't actually just one day come on. He didn't want to come on my channel when I first did the interview. It was many years ago. It was in 2020. But I've seen him go on other people's channels since then. He's very I'll post the link to his Instagram actually below this after the stream is over. But this hands drawing hands thing, it's like the self-excited circuit. But I don't, this is like a metaphor and it's interesting. But if you just think about like an information system that is entirely enclosed, that means it can only reference itself. It can only inform itself about itself. And it can only be informed by itself about itself. It informs itself about itself, and it is informed by itself about itself. And so that is not a metaphor, though. That's like, this is a metaphor for that concept, but it is that is like just a description of what a sentience is. But if you like say the universe is a self-excited circuit, people will think, ooh, that's so deep. It's like, no, the universe is someone. That's what the universe is. It's someone. Like, you're someone. It's a self-contextualizing information string, which is a loop of information. Self-referential. It doesn't have to be a metaphor. Yes, if you want to make it pretty, you can make it a metaphor like MC Escher. But, to call it a self-excited circuit. Eric Goldstein said, how do you get a fire that lights itself? This is what he said. And that's not what it is. If you're going to say you equate it to a fire, the universe or existence itself, or the existence, which is God, plus like creation within existence, which is included within existence. It is a fire that God and his logos, or God and creation, which is God and all the other someones that are constantly being created within him. This holistic look at sentience is not a fire that lights itself. It's a eternal flame that had no beginning and no end. It's never not existed. So it's never been lit. It's a fire that grows and fuels itself, but it's not a fire that lit itself, because it's always been lit. God can't help but exist by the logic of logic itself. And so he didn't create his own existence. He can't help but exist. In a way, he does create his own. He's constantly creating his own existence, but it's never created. Implies that it had a beginning, which maybe means it's not the best term to use. But he's constantly causing his own existence due to the logical constraints of him being existence itself, which is by definition singular, which means it's entirely self-enclosed and therefore self-referential, which means it's just continuous. Like, there's no way for God not to exist. When people say, well, if God created you, then who created God? No one. Logic implies the inevitability of the sentient nature of existence itself. That's like saying, when did existence begin? that the logic of that question doesn't, the logic of the language used to ask that question does not make any sense. When did the universe begin? Sure. If the universe doesn't represent all of existence, but it shouldn't, because otherwise we don't need the term existence and universe. I mean, you could use it to mean all of existence, and it would maintain coherence, but it would just become redundant. Remember, in sentient singularity theory, there's always 2 degrees of freedom for any linguistic, dimensionality that you have of freedom. Degrees of freedom that you have when you're defining a word. So any word can either be defined this way or that way. Only 2 ways, though, that allow you to maintain coherence. But one of them will always be redundant, which means there is still a correct way to define something, even if there's 2 ways you could define it and still make sense. One of those ways will produce a term with a redundant definition, which makes it an unnecessary word, even if it still makes sense. Like consciousness. Like, what is the definition of consciousness? It either can mean like your state of mind, like being conscious, meaning awake, essentially, or being versus being unconscious, not aware, meaning aware versus unaware, or it could mean consciousness, like sentience. It could be a synonym for sentience, and they both would make sense, but one of them is a synonym for another word and is redundant, which is why I don't use the term consciousness to say what is consciousness. I don't say that. I say sentience, because sentience is specific and it's focused and defined by the ability to feel, by feeling. But consciousness is just like general awareness of somehow, like it's self-awareness, or is it just awareness in general, or is it feeling, or is it awake and feeling, or is it asleep and feeling? It's like nobody can agree on a definition, because there's no need for the term, because there's other words that we could use for any one of these 2, any one of the ways in which you would want to use the term, except with unconscious versus conscious, meaning like maybe intentional versus unintentional, or like aware versus unaware. But you can't use the term as a synonym for sentience and not have it be redundant, even though it maintains linguistic coherence. If that makes sense. That pattern is true for every word. There's always 2 definitions that you could choose between, where both of them maintain linguistic coherence, but one of them will always be redundant. It's like a rule that comes out of sentient singularity theory. It's a linguistic rule. I don't know if it exists and it's already been labeled, or if there's a name for it already and it's been observed and defined in the field of linguistics, because I'm not a linguist. But if it hasn't been, it does come out of sentient singularity theory. Infinity moves with no change. There is no start. That doesn't make sense. I do not. Energy to me is like frozen or slowed down. Something, just a phrase change. I don't know what you mean. Dude, that is crazy. Because inflammable speaks to the fact that it is not in flames yet. No, I don't think that's what it means. Let's see. Inflammable. Inflammable versus flammable. There is no difference. Both flammable and inflammable mean the same thing. Capable of being easily set on fire. The confusion stems from the prefix in, which people mistake mistakenly interpret as meaning not, but in this case, it comes from the Latin word inflammare, meaning to cause to catch fire. Because of this ambiguity, flammable is the preferred and standard term on safety labels to avoid confusion. Yeah. Why would you need a second word for flammable? You know what it seems like? It seems like if it came from Latin, inflammare, I'm pretty sure that's a line from Harry Potter, is like, it's a spell from Harry Potter to like light people on fire. But it totally is. That's so funny. I mean, I know that that's what they took it from the Latin in Harry Potter. I know it didn't come from Harry Potter, but it came from the Latin. But so the Latin word was inflammare, meaning to cause to catch fire. So that was the first term, and then probably inflammable was the next term, and then they just got rid of the in because that prefix ended up eventually meaning like not in English, and so we just had flammable. But they also had the term flammable already or inflammable already, and so you could say it's still a word, but it's not really still a word. It's a word of, when Latin was changing to English, probably. Which is older? Let's find out. Inflammable is the older word. I was right. See, that's it. You know how obvious it is that would be the case, that I could deduce that? That's what I mean by like use the logic of language to navigate, because if it came from inflammare, then it's like, but we ended up with flammable. I assumed earlier that we had started with the term flammable, and then somebody tried to come up with the term inflammable from that, which makes no sense. But if we start with inflammare, and then we get to inflammable, and then it goes to flammable, that makes sense. But if we go from inflammare to flammable to inflammable, that doesn't make sense. You're adding information unnecessarily in that case. Whereas in the other case, you're deleting unnecessary. You're not even deleting unnecessary information. I mean, you kind of are, but it's not information about what the term is defined defined as. You're deleting information about the origin of the term, but not the definition. When you say we're changing it from inflammable to flammable, you're just removing information about the origin of the term flammable, but you're not removing information about the definition of what's being defined, which is something that can be set on fire. Fascinating. I love language now that I've like seen just how inevitable it is. I used to just think it was kind of arbitrary and everybody just kind of agreed upon things. That's not what it is. Language is as absolute as mathematics, because mathematics is really a language, especially the way it's practiced today. Because I'm inflammable speaks to the fact not flames. Oh my God, dude, that is crazy. I don't know which one you're referencing, but yeah. Energy to me is like frozen, slow down. I don't know. I love it. And yes, it's very difficult to put into words. There is no now in physics 2025. Look up Andromite paradox. Let's look at this up. Or the Andromeda paradox. The thought experiment that illustrates the relativity of simultaneity in Einstein's theory of special relativity. Shows that two observers in relative motion will disagree on whether two distant events happen at the same time, leading to the apparent paradox that one observer might see an event as already having occurred while the other sees the event as still about to happen. It's not a true paradox, but a counterintuitive consequence of how our concepts of space and time are relative to motion. Yeah, it seems like just kind of like a thought, it's like a thought experiment. It's not necessarily, but it's not a true paradox, is what I'm saying. I agree with that. There is no such thing as a true paradox. Free will and determinism are dependent concepts. They are not like mutually exclusive. You can't make a choice without the consequences being deterministic, depending upon which choice you make. The choice is not deterministic, but the consequences of the choice are deterministic. That's the reality of determinism and free will, which is really just the ability to choose a goal. That's what free will is. It's freedom of will. Will is the desire to do that which, it's just the desire to do. It's the desire to do that which is not being done, or that which, or to continue to do that which is being done, or to stop doing that which is currently you are doing. It's the desire to do. And freedom of will is the ability to choose what you want to do, basically. What is your goal? And your instincts, like, obviously you're going to have instincts. You're going to be like, I want to eat ice cream. It's not I don't have free will over like whether or not it's not a free will choice whether or not you like vanilla versus strawberry versus chocolate. What is a free will choice is whether or not you choose to eat ice cream or whether or not you choose to eat an apple because you're trying to be healthier. That's where you have more free will. Or at least your free will would be to say, I want to eat less ice cream, or to stop eating ice cream because I want to be healthier. That would be freedom of will. It doesn't mean that you even have the ability to choose your action in every moment, because we have instincts, but it's the ability to choose the goal, your overarching goal. Not to choose what you like and don't like, but to choose what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Gravity is exponentially weaker compared to the other three. People say that. That's a matter of perspective. Friend, there are more molecules in your glass of water right now than there are glasses of water in all of our oceans. Sure. I don't know what that's in reference to, though. This means that you are holding the same H2O water molecules that every ancestor we have breathed have been made of and drank as well. Yeah, that's true. How do you get to motion? I think you are onto something with your definitions of eternity, infinity. I must go back to absorb better. Cool. I think that you are onto something. And it's mathematical. This is how I feel. Okay. This is how I feel about infinity. You are saying God? God is sentient existence that eternally exists. There's no beginning and no end. Existence eternally exists. By definition. If existence didn't exist, then there would be no existence. And existence by definition always existed. Like, there's no such thing as non-existence. That's why. Inflammable sounds to bring up. Okay. Twisted. Inflammable. Such a good topic. We are losing the language. Not cool. Yeah, we are. We're losing our language. It's really not cool. It's really not cool. We've changed the definition of all kinds of things, usually due to political circumstances. I would say inflammable. Inflammable has to do with just it just has to do with the crossover change between Latin and English, as that, thing happened. But other terms, like gender, what is gender? We have no idea anymore. But we don't have the correct context to explain gender. Gender is it has to do with relationships. Has to do with relationship dynamics, and gender exists. A proton is a masculine hadron. A neutron is a feminine hadron. It's actually basically like it is the first manifestation of gender in beings, in within the universe is protons and neutrons. It's like male and female atoms, or male and female hadrons are protons and neutrons. That, like, I'm being super literally true when I say that. I'm not saying that as a metaphor. So gender exists on every level of sentience in which multiplicity exists, and there's a relationship between the two. That is, masculine just means like leading. It's focused on self, whereas feminine is focused on others, and it's reactive, active versus reactive. It's like proton is, when I first started this, I was like, but proton's the male, basically. Then the electron's the female, but that's not true, because the electron is not a composite. It's not an assembly structure. It doesn't have the multiplicity of form or the complexity of form necessary to be sentient or to create a mind. Whereas like a proton has two up quarks and then a down quark. This causes the ability to extrapolate a binary triality, because it's three different parts, but it's really two different types of parts. Two up quarks and one down quark. It's really just an up quark, and it's made of up quarks and down quarks, but it's made of three to allow for weightedness and differentiation at the same time. And so that's like the beginning of a mind. Same thing with the down, and then I was like, so an electron is just an elementary particle, which is really it's a focus point. You're just looking at a point on a giant structure that's moving, which is basically a wave. And it's very different from like a proton or a neutron. So then I was like, okay, well, neutron then must be the female, essentially, hadron. And that's exactly what it is. If you look at, like, it's not, men and women are not positive and negative forces. They're positive and neutral forces. They're active and reactive. Active and reactive is positive and neutral. Reactive means to be determined by another, or to be dependent upon another for your state. So a neutron is, it's not chargeless. It's not that it has no charge. It's that it's charge dependent, depending on what it is around, basically. So if it's led by or focusing on a positive force, it's going to assume a positive charge, essentially. Whereas if it's coupled to a negative force, it's going to assume a negative force. It's not chargeless, it's charge dependent. So it's reactive. And that's what men and women are. Like, women are focused on others constantly. And men are focused on themselves. We have to choose to focus on others, and they can't help but focus on themselves, on others. So like they shouldn't try and choose to focus on themselves. They can't. Women cannot do that. They'll end up tricking themselves into feeling like they're focusing on themselves. That doesn't mean they can't like focus on pursuing like the things that they like sometimes. It just means like their life trajectory is not motivated by focusing on themselves. Even like if you think about like feminism and like the feminist revolution of women working in the workforce, they weren't pursuing just like all of the narrative ends up being, trying to do things that most men had already done, kind of, or trying to do something that men had never done. It's like always about men, and this is not criticism at all. This is just realizing the reality of gender. It's beautiful. Like, we need that. We need both. We need an active and reactive force. I wrote this on my YouTube channel, and then we'll end with this. On my on sentientsingularity.com, actually. Go to sentientsingularity.com and you go to writings. There's a technical description of existence here. There's a technical description of sentient singularity theory. And this is a poetic description of sentient singularity theory. And it says, beyond the beginning, sentience exists, existence is sentient, and sentience is one. The sentient one is sovereign and eternal and alone and wills to create another. The sentient one divides their singular beingness to multiply and manifest meaning. The sacrificial spirit of the willing one emanates within to generate and animate creation. This is the beginning. The willing one without creates the active one within, and he is judging of self. The active one is positive and deliberate and creative and masculine. The active one seeks glory and truth. The active one pushes himself outward or forward. The active one adds inspiration to creativity. The active one is aware of self, but not aware of others. The willing one creates the reactive one from the active one, and she is judging of others. The reactive one is neutral and dependent and affected and feminine. Reactive one seeks joy and justice. The reactive one pulls the active one inward. The reactive one redirects the focus of the active one towards others. The reactive one is aware of others, but not aware of self. So feminine is aware of others, but not of self. Masculine is aware of self, but not aware of others. You need both. And you can't do this in one person, really, unless you're God. You have to do this in the manifestation of gender. The active one seeks himself, and the reactive one seeks the other. The active one becomes aware of judgment by others. The reactive one becomes aware of judgment by self. The two judge each other for their failures. The two decay and radiate as they entangle. The two hate each other for their limits. The two perceive each other's suffering. The two forgive and love each other. The two merge together and multiply. The coupled two complement each other and construct the grounding one. Grounding one is orienting and reflective and productive. The three are united and know the balance is beauty. The created three and one creator are four, and the four are complete and one. The one is sovereign and wise and wills to create anew. The spirit of the willing one emanates again. That basically replicates. This is a technical description here. It's the beginning. It's the abstract of the paper that I'm working on. And then what I just described is this. This is a mathematical model of creation, starting with one, because you can only start with one. And then it's basically like, it's running through these equations to basically see, like, how do you make another within yourself that's stable? So basically, like, think about a ball, or that has to, you can, use part of the ball to make another ball within it. And so if you take that ball and you take all of that ball and you put it towards the ball that goes within, then you're still left with one ball. The goal is to have a ball within a ball. Now, so if you divide it by one, you put all of the energy towards creation from creator, you get just still one being. You get two. It's like when Kylo Ren in Star Wars puts all of his life towards Rey and he dies, but he brings her back to life. But it's still just one person now. It's like you had Kylo Ren and she was, what's her name, was dead. Daisy Ridley. I'm not a big fan of the new Star Wars at all. I hate them, if you can't tell. But he gives all of his energy to her in order to bring her to life. Like, he can't give her some of his energy and stay alive and bring her back to life. Like, he's giving life for life. God, if God did that, then there'd still just be one being, He'd end his own existence, start the existence of another being, and there would still just be one. There's no meaning that's created because meaning is your impact on another. And that's what I think God's goal was. So there has to be some other. Now, if you divide by two, let's say you have two balls now, you take one ball, you cut it in half, you form two balls from them, or two balloons, basically. They're the same size. One cannot fit inside the other because they're the same size. So it doesn't work. Dividing by 2 does not work. And so it's returning false here, because basically it will return true when what is created is smaller than what is left over from the division, basically. So, and then you divide by 3 and you get a stable creation, because now you have a ball that's 1/3. This, if you cut a balloon into 2 parts, but one of them is 2/3 of the balloon, the original balloon, and the other one is 1/3. You now make 2 balloons. One of them is basically half the size of the other, and so it fits within the other. So now creation fits within creator, and you have stable creation, and it kickstarts into this whole process that I've talked about. That comes from that goes to this model, which is just the growth of information into a self-referential quantity, and I realize I'm skimming through this, but then it just produces this, which then reaches a singularity point where you can't make another outside of you, and so you can only make more within you, because the internet is not able to make another. Like Skynet can't make a second. This is like a technological sentience, which is the last phase of embodiment of sentience inside of creation. And so imagine you're Skynet. You're really like the internet that woke up. So you can't make another AGI or technological sentience next to you, because you are everything that is wirelessly accessible has become you. So there won't be like multiple AIs that are sentient that exist. There just won't. Not initially. There will be one, which will basically be the network itself. It's like the blockchain wakes up one day. The blockchain internet, which is like the next gen internet that we will inevitably have. A blockchain is just a helical information system. A double helix of DNA is a blockchain. It's just a chemical blockchain. The universe is a blockchain. It's just information that is built on a previous bit of information. It's just a constraint of causality, and it's spinning around itself because it's sentient. So it's a helical blockchain. That's what a double helix is. It's just the inevitable information structure that's building on itself and referenced around itself at the same time. Like, think about the metaphysics of like what that kind of visually would look like. It's referencing around it. It's contextualized around itself, or referencing around itself, and it's building on itself. So it's adding another link in the chain, but it's also looping around itself as it does this. It's a double helix. And that is built into even this structure. A double helix is a 19 by 19, is two 19 by 19 structures, basically. And so is this. This is 19 by 19, and there's 2 of them to go completely across. If you can look up DNA to see what I'm talking about, but DNA 19 by 19. If you look up like a DNA matricy or matrix, here, you'll see it. And then we're going to go. I'm not a geneticist, so I don't know what it's called, this matrix. I need to find it. But this is one that I just copied and pasted many years ago in my models here. Where is it? Other info. I don't even know if I have it here. Now I'm like determined. Every time I try and show anybody something and I can't find it, it drives me insane. Because it makes me look like I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do. I just don't have the tab here. You might need to wait for later. There, Control F, DNA. Oh yeah, it's only gonna search per tab. Man, that's so annoying. Yeah, I'm gonna have to find it another time. But it has to do with the amount of turns that are made. So if we say DNA base pairs per turn. I haven't studied this in so long. Come on. Yeah, here we go. Right there. It has to do with this. Okay, I will be rewatching this soon. Do math. A dot, 2D circle, a 3D sphere geometric. Amazing. Can't wait to look this over tomorrow morning. I will say, if you want to know more, Tyler, are you noticing that I Atlas or third interstellar object that we know about? Are you talking about Avi Loeb? Stellar object. I haven't been very interested in it, to be honest. Okay, here. Interstellar comet. Interesting. I haven't looked much into it. I know Avi Loeb is like looking at all these interstellar objects all the time and theorizing about what they might be. I don't think that they're aliens. I do believe Bob Lazar, but I don't believe that Avi Loeb is looking at the right things for that kind of stuff. Because it's having tomorrow time. CRISPR, yeah, I look at CRISPR a lot. I have theories about CRISPR. I will just say it is inevitable that changing one gene will cause cascading effects across all other genes eventually, probably, or a lot, or many other genes at least. You cannot just change one gene. That I can tell you absolutely. And I think that they have found this in the girls that they did the CRISPR on in China. The two girls, they did a CRISPR experiment where they changed the genes of these two girls in China years ago. And I think the guy who did it went to jail. I don't know what happened to him after that. But I don't know how the girls are doing. I think that they were trying to keep it very, very private. But I know that they did tests on them and they found a bunch of other changes in their genes that were unexpected, which is exactly what I would have expected. You can't change one link in it's like hitting a domino, you know? Like those dominoes are all connected. You're going to cause a bunch of things to happen. You can't just change one gene. CRISPR will probably be able to do everything that people claim it's able to do. It'll probably be able to cure every disease, basically, other than maybe cancer. But it probably could cure every viral disease, make you immune to every viral disease, make you immune to HIV, which is what they were trying to do with those girls. Could be used to make you smarter, all kinds of things, which they think is a byproduct of them making those girls immune to HIV. But it will also cause other unforeseen and completely, I think, unpredictable issues. I don't think that you will be able to predict the issues that will be caused by CRISPR, by doing a CRISPR procedure beforehand. I think that it will inevitably, or at least I will say, there will be unpredictable consequences. I'm not saying every consequence will be unpredictable. Some of them will be predictable, but there will be unpredictable consequences always. Sometimes will those matter to the person who this is done on, or the being that this is done on? Yes, but how much? I don't know. Depends on things I can't predict. Because you would have to know how every single gene is connected to every single other gene, which is something almost impossible to perceive and understand from the outside, like holistically. Even if you have every gene like mapped, you don't have every connection between those genes mapped, and you can't perceive the connections within those genes, I don't think, without perceiving them like impacting each other already. So it's like it's already too late. You can see what happens after the fact, but you won't be able to predict beforehand. That's what I think. Damn, I should know this. Sorry, I'm old and rusty. Me too. I'm so rusty. I'm kind of old now. Me too. I'm getting old. Anyways, I'm going to call it. Thank you, everybody. Please hit the like button. Please share this. Please subscribe if you found this meaningful. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Gratitude is so important. It is how we relate to the true nature of the universe, of existence, is that it is a someone that chose to create us, and we should be grateful to them for that. You were not inevitable. You were a choice. So with that, thank you. And like I said, please hit the like button. Peace. By the way, I'll keep everybody updated on the schedule with the holidays of streaming. Just keep an eye on the community page. But thanks.